Mystery of a Butcher's Shop by Gladys Mitchell. Dramatized by Elizabeth Pride. With Mary Wimbush as Mrs. Lestrange Bradley, Richard Pearce as Aubrey Haringey, and Christopher Schooler as James Redsey. Part 1. An Awful Discovery.
I say! Well played, that girl. That's 2 games all. Shall we have a decider this time before tea?
If you like. I say, Aubrey, who's that man going up to the front door?
The Reverend Bird. No idea. Got any more balls your side, Felicity? My serve, I think.
Here you are.
Thanks.
But he isn't a reverend gentleman, you know.
How twiggy he isn't a padre.
He hasn't a dog collar. Use your eyes, little boy.
Must be a legal eagle, then. Cousin Rupert's always seeing lawyers about his beastly money. Wonder if he's got up yet. He wasn't down for lunch, the lazy pig. Ready? Here goes.
Gone? To America?
Yes. I'm Jim Redsey, by the way, Rupert's cousin, Mr.
Theodore Grayling, Mr. Sethley's solicitor.
Lovely.
When did he go?
Today. Early this morning.
To America? Strange. Very strange. Perhaps you can tell me, Mr. Redsey, why he requested me to come down here this afternoon in order to effect certain alterations in the testamentary disposal of his property.
Eh? Oh, you mean...
Change his will.
Yes. I mean, no. Well, that is... Do you mean Sethley asked you to come down here today? I didn't know that. You see, I'm only staying here until I hear about a job I've been promised. In Mexico.
I see. Mr. Redsey...
Of course, it was rather decent of Settley to have me here, especially as we don't really... know each other frightfully well. Our respective maters didn't exactly hit it off, you see.
Mr. Redsey...
Look here, my aunt will be down to tea. We'd better discuss the thing together.
Your aunt? Mr. Sethley's mother?
Oh, no, she died. Another aunt, Mrs. Bryce Haringey.
I see. Mr. Redsey, I am quite at a loss to understand your cousins going off to America like this. It is not at all the kind of thing Rupert Sethley would do.
No. That is, I mean, no?
No. And what motive had he?
Motive? What do you mean, motive?
Why on earth should...
James, what is this I hear?
Oh, Aunt Constance, may I present Mr. Theodore Grayling?
Good afternoon.
I know Mr. Grayling already. How do you do, Mr. Grayling? You might have imagined that fact for yourself, James, if you possessed the brain of a bat, which of course you do not and never will. Now listen to me. I have made the most appalling discovery.
Oh.
James.
Oh, well, you know, all for the best, I mean. What I mean to say, these things are sent to try us, and all that.
I agree that it will certainly try me most sorely, James, and your manifest sympathy is most touching, especially as the lady in question is entirely unknown to you.
Eh? What lady in question?
Certainly, Mrs. Lestrange Bradley. She has come to live in Wandle's parlour. She has taken the stone house.
Phew, terrific shot, Felicity.
Practice, my child. I'll collect the balls if you see to the net.
Right you are. Hello? Here he comes again.
Oh,
The bird who isn't a reverend. And with the mater, what's more, poor old bird.
of course.
She's probably grilling him in her best Lady Bracknell fashion. Did you see the importance?
Of course I did. And you'll have to tell me about it. I'm too envious.
Doesn't your pater care about the theatre? Moral scruples and whatnot?
Father hasn't any morals. He's a clergyman. We can't afford the theatre, that's all. I'm going in now to get washed before tea. Coming?
Let's go in through the library. I expect old Jim's in there.
Yes, Rupert has invited the Vicar of Crewless Cumboon to look at the garden on Thursday, I believe.
The Vicar of...
Quite an authority on alpine plants, I understand.
Well, I do hope he will understand when he finds that your nephew has gone to America.
What? I say, old Jim's got the hump today or something. Have you noticed?
I don't think he's very well. He's rather a jolly man usually, isn't he?
Don't know him frightfully well, you know. His mater and old Rupert's mater never hit it off. And my pater, who was the brother, couldn't see either of them, so I've hardly met Jim until this holiday.
You like him, though, don't you?
Oh, he's all right. Knocks spots off old Rupert. He's the most frightful outsider that ever lived.
Gone to America?
I say, the mater's in a bait today. Let's make ourselves scarce. After you, Miss Broom.
I don't believe a word of it. I shall go immediately to the vicarage and find out what Mr. Broom knows about this mad freak. He witnessed Rupert's last will, and so I suppose is in his confidence, which is more than can be said of his nearest relations. Come along, Mr. Grayling. We'll go through the woods. There's a shortcut.
Thank you, kind sir. Oh, hello, Jimsy.
Oh.
I say, are you all right? You look dreadful.
Yes. You do look as though something's got you in the gizzard, old lad.
A touch of the sun, I expect.
You don't feel sick, do you? You're a horrible greenish-white colour.
As though you're going bad. You know. Sure you're fit?
Quite sure, thanks.
Goodo. Where's old Rupert?
No idea. What about tea?
On the lawn. It's lovely out there.
Yes. Isn't it? Run and tell your mother and the solicitor, would you, Aubrey?
Not a lot of use, old lad. They've gone to the vicarage. At least they were making off towards the woods when last spotted.
Towards the woods? Oh, good God. Hi! Aunt Constance! I say! Grayling, stop! I say, stop a minute! Oh, dash it! I say! Half a minute! Hi!
Good Lord.
You don't think he really has got a touch of the sun, do you?
Heaven knows, sweet child. I say, though, did you hear? That bird is a legal eagle. Must have come to see Rupert. Wonder what old Jim's in such a bait about.
I wonder where Rupert is.
Stop! Hi! I say, where are you? Oh, stop a minute! I say! How constant... Oh, there you are. Phew.
Really, James? You are a most offensive-looking object. Most. You are perspiring, boy.
Sorry. Yes, I know. It's beastly hot weather. Damn well out of training. Been running, you know. Came to tell you it's tea time.
No.
Hate you to miss your tea. Cold tea, you see, such beastly stuff. No? Yes?
You are puerile, James. Mr. Grayling and I are going to the vicarage to discover the truth about Rupert.
Truth about Rupert? You don't know what you're talking about. The vicar doesn't know the truth about Rupert.
James, pray control yourself.
Yes. Control. And tea. It's ready.
I must say, a cup of tea would be very welcome.
Oh, but the vicar will be out after tea. He is never at the vicarage after 5 o'clock on Mondays.
Then I fear we should scarcely catch him, as the time is now...
Oh.
Come, Mrs. Haringey. You'll feel much better after a cup of tea.
Oh, very well.
Phew. That was a near thing.
Good night, Mater. Sleep well.
Phew. Oh, it's still beastly hot. Better. Hello? What are you up to, Jimsy, my buck? With a spade, too. Perhaps he's robbed old Rupert's safe and is going to bury the spoils. I say, what a lark. Elementary, Watson, you goop.
Who's there?
Wish he wouldn't keep turning round. Jolly confusing, this wood at night. Doggo! Chap's got a hurricane lamp. Yes, I was right. He's starting to dig. Beastly place he's picked, too. That's the Druid stone altar behind him. And these pines all round. Really spooky. Great jumping cats. He's trying to get through to Australia. Must be 3 feet down at least. Difficult to see how long from here. 6 feet? must be a grave. Now what's he doing? The chap must be off his chump. Walked off and left the spade. I wonder what I'd better do. Anyway, I'll pinch the spade before he can do any damage with it. Oh, quick, before he comes back. Devil. Phew, that was close. What's he looking for? He's coming straight over here. I better skedaddle.
Hey, you! Stop! Come here! I've got you! Oh! Dash it! Come back, you! I say!
Shocking goings-on in the village lately.
Oh, that's right, you Laley. Fighting in the Queen's Head Sunday night, so I hear tell.
Who was?
That young Mr. Wright up at the cottage.
Oh, artists they are.
And Farmer Galloway. Though they do say as Mr. Wright started it, hitting young Galloway over the head with yog pudding.
There you are.
And young Mr. Redsey lying dead drunk in the middle of it all.
Never.
Ah, but that's not all.
Oh, you mean Squire Sefley going off to the States so sudden like?
Worse than that, Mrs. Willows. There's been a murder done at the butcher's in the market down in Bosbury.
Oh, not Henry Binks. Such a respectable man. Sober, too.
Well, what I say it's a judgment on him. A man was never meant to make his living out of killing the done animals and offering their carcasses for sale. I'm a vegetarian myself, though I can't persuade Mr. Blenkins into it, I'm sorry to say.
But what's Mr. Binks done?
Oh, he hasn't done nothing that I know of. At least I hope it isn't him that's done it. It's what he found. Human joints, my dear.
Oh, human joints? Why, whatever do you mean, you Lady Blenkin?
Yes, this morning, first thing he found them. You know Henry Binks lives over his main shop in the Purley Road, and he leases the lock-up shop in the market.
Yes.
Well, Monday not being a good day in his line of business, he never troubles to go down and open the lock-up till Tuesday. Well, first thing this morning then, being Tuesday, he goes down to the market shop as usual, and what does he find?
What? Oh, get on with it, you lady!
I tell you what Henry Binks found. He found a body. A human body. All cut up into joints as neat as he could have done it himself. And all hung up on his hooks where he generally hangs his beef and his lamb. His very tools had been used to do the job, so folks do say. The police is keeping them for fingerprints.
Bones, them, bones, them, hurrah, bones, them, bones, them, bones, them, hurrah, bones, them, bones, them, bones, them, hurrah, bones, now hear the word of the Lord.
Fingerprints? Hundreds of them, sir. Pity the murderer had the sense to take the head away with him. Then we'd have known who the dead man is.
Yes, it's a damn nuisance. Then look at the cleverness of dismembering the corpse in a butcher's shop. Nobody wonders what the chopping noise is for.
He left it very tidy, though, didn't he, if that's where he did it? Looks like a local fella. Special knowledge and all that.
Grindy, a murder case is always dirty work. And in a case of this kind, where you've got to establish identity before you can get down to anything else, it's the very devil. And a confounded waste of time.
Identification, yes. Fattish, youngish, and well cared for, according to the doctor. Not a lot to go on, sir.
Well, he was obviously a gentleman. Bath every day, sort of look those limbs have got, if you notice.
I better start by finding out who's missing.
Well, as to that, there's some sort of mystery at Wandle's parlour. Their big bug, Settler, you know, has suddenly taken it into his head to go to America, but nobody seems to know anything about it. His aunt, Mrs. Bryce Haringey, sent us a letter this morning. Here's a description of him. It might fit the corpse.
Bones, them, hurrah, bones, them, bones, them, bones, them, hurrah, bones, them, bones, them, bones, them, hurrah, bones, now hear the word of the Lord.
Oh, Jim, old bird.
Aubrey, thought you'd gone to bed.
Yes, I had. That's to say I've snooped under the mater's bally bed and scared away the bogies and burglars for her. And then I thought I'd just have a word with you about this spade.
What the devil?
Yes, it's the one you were using last night in the woods. I hate to ask you, old lad, but where is that blighter Rupert?
You!
it, you stiff! You'll do me in!
Come here, you little blighter! Hello? Who's that? I'm off.
Aubrey!
Who is it?
It's me. Let me come in. Quick.
Hello, Felicity.
Where's Jimsy?
Gone to bed.
Who are you shouting at just now?
Me?
Don't be silly. Who was being unkind to you?
No one, dear child. Nobody's ever unkind to me. I say, I suppose you've heard the glad tidings that are around the village.
You mean the murder?
The butcher's shop business. Yes. Beastly, isn't it?
Aubrey, that's what I've come to see you about. I suppose I ought to have told Father, but really he's such a priceless old ass, he'd only go and get somebody into trouble. So I thought I'd talk it over with you. You're young, but you're awfully sensible.
Obliged, I'm sure. Well?
You know our dust heap.
Survivals of medieval England, in other words, past pluperfect of the verb stinke, to give forth an obtrusive odour with malice aforethought.
Yes, well, it's excelled itself. I found a suitcase on it. It has Rupert Sethley's initials on it. I'm practically certain that it's the suitcase he lent Father when we went away for a holiday last month.
Funny way of returning it.
I thought Father had returned it. But what terrifies me is the inside is horribly stained with blood.
My hat.
Yes, isn't it? It's so awkward with poor old Jimsy digging that ghastly grave and everything.
Eh?
I was in the woods last night, out for a walk. I saw him chasing you and everything.
Oh, I see. We're in this together, then. Good. You know the Roberts have been here all the afternoon, don't you?
The who?
The police, you innocent. Old Jim got the wind up and no mistake when he saw them.
Oh, I can't believe it of Jimsy. Aubrey, what was happening in here when I came along?
Oh, I made the poor old thing a bit hairy, you know. Tactless of me, really. I mean, a man may think a man has dotted a man one over the nut in a fit of peevishness or absent-mindedly, but a man has no earthly right to indicate to a man that a man suspects such to be the case.
Yes, I see what you mean. And he was angry with you?
He had a shot at slamming that spade down on top of my head. Only the coffee table got in the way.
Aubrey, what are we going to do?
Well, how about if I come back to the vicarage with you, collect the gory suitcase and bung it down the hole old Jim dug?
Well, I don't know.
Once you've given me the case, you can cut off to bed. I'll do the rest. Hang on, though. What if the Roberts come nosing round? Better not let them find the suitcase. Perhaps I could put something else there instead. I know. Just the very thing.
I knew I heard burglars.
Burglars? What rot!
I object, James, both to your speech and the tone in which you see fit to deliver it. And you are looking quite liverish this morning, Aubrey. I repeat, there were burglars in this house last night. They have stolen a valuable trout from the case in the hall.
Valuable? What tosh? A beastly lot of mid-Victorian atrocities, those trout. As a matter of fact, one of them is a roach. Valuable?
If it were not valuable, the burglars would not have taken it. If you are going to choke, Aubrey, will you please go outside?
Oh dear. Felicity, could you see if I put Tacitus on the mantelpiece in there?
Here you are.
Oh, thank you, my dear. Will you take the clock back for me?
Yes. I don't want to upset you, sweetest, but we shan't have a single clock in the house that will keep correct time if you go pushing them into the pockets of your coat like that.
No.
Now, about the tennis party. Whom shall we have?
You please yourself, my dear.
Well, there's Aubrey, his awful mother, and Jimsy. That's 3 from the manor. Then I owe Mr. Wright an invitation, so that means asking Mr. Saville and the unspeakable Lulu from the cottage on the hill. I ought to ask Marjorie Barnes. She doesn't get much fun, poor kid. And Dr. Barnes. No use asking Mrs. Barnes, she's away. What about the Major?
What about Mr. Sethley? You didn't include him with the manor crowd.
Darling, I keep telling you he's gone to America.
Really? That's very curious.
Why?
Why? Well, he wants me to witness his will. I promised to go over there on Monday afternoon when his solicitor was due to arrive, but I completely forgot it.
But you did witness his will, darling, ever so long ago, don't you remember?
Oh, yes, I remember that will, but he was going to alter it. You see, the chief beneficiary was young James Redsey, but he must have done something to annoy his cousin, because this new will cuts him right out and leaves the bulk of the property to the boy Aubrey.
But are you certain?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, by the way, I think I must go into Culminster this afternoon. I want to see Crowdsley about the repairing fund. We must have something done about the west door.
Good idea. Perhaps he'll give you something nice for lunch if you trot off at once. Huh? Bishops generally have nice food, don't they? And there's nothing but the cold lamb here, and precious little of that.
There's a lady across the half daughters be wanting his reverence. Will I be after asking her within?
You will, Mary Kate, and kindly refrain from instructing her to wipe her shoes on the mat, as you did when the bishop came to call.
Sure, and wouldn't that be foolishness itself, with no rain falling these 20 days and the road without as dry as Tim Nix's throat, and the whole of the sky like brazen brass entirely? Will you come this way? Mrs. Lestrange, Bradley.
Am I addressing the spiritual advisor of this parish?
Well, I suppose so, but that is, yes.
Then I am compelled to state that, in my opinion, the west door is a disgrace.
We were just talking about it, but the Restoration Fund, all told, only amounts to 29 shillings and 7pence. What's the use of that, I should like to know?
A lovely child, and so angry with me. Have the door repaired. Send me the estimates. I will pay the bill.
Oh, but I'm going to see the bishop about it this very afternoon. I mean, it's tremendously kind of you.
Don't worry, I'm solvent. As for going to see Reginald Crowdsley, you might as well save your time, young man. Look here, suppose I give you a cheque for the Restoration Fund, and then you can muddle along in your own way with it. I suppose he is a muddler, child. He looks like one.
A palpable hit, Mrs. Bradley. Oh, by the way, why don't you come to our tennis party tomorrow afternoon? Then that will make the number of people you wanted, Felicity, dear.
Yes, it will. We'd be delighted, Mrs. Bradley.
So would I.
She's a most infuriating woman.
Yes, the mater loathes her too. She's a psychoanalyst.
A what?
Psychoanalyst. I don't know what they do, quite. I believe it's something mad but brainy. The mater collects these new movements, and she tried to collect Mrs. Bradley, who appears to be rather a brass hat at the business, but the old dame wasn't having any, said that what the mater needed wasn't a psychoanalyst, but a copper-plated dummy, because all her moods and tempers were simply due to indigestion. Of course, the mater was rather fed and tried to get our solicitor to start an action for slander or something, but he only told her to think herself lucky she'd had such good advice absolutely free of charge. So the mater tried the diet stunt, as recommended by Mrs. Bradley, and has positively never looked back.
Fancy.
Oh, and by the way, rather a confounded nuisance. That suitcase of Rupert's, it's gone.
Oh, but you buried it on Tuesday night.
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't. I left it in the bushes while I went to get the fish. And I wish I knew whether the silly blighter who swiped it was playing a practical joke or whether... Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
I haven't the least idea what you're talking about. What happened?
Telling you, I went up to the house to get a stuffed fish to shove into the hole old Jim made on Monday night, and when I got back, the beastly case had gone. Someone had taken it.
But I can't think why you didn't bury it as we'd arranged.
Well, I thought... The police, you see. They'll nose about. Sure to. They'll spot the freshly dug earth, then they'll excavate. Well, it wouldn't do for them to find the blood-stained baggage, would it? With old Rupert's initials as large as life on the lid. Especially since old Jim can't prove an alibi for the time in question.
You think the murdered man is Rupert, don't you? But he can't be. I mean, things like that don't happen to people one knows. I tell you what, though, Aubrey. The thought that someone was watching us in those woods on Monday night, and again last night, it makes me crawl all over.
Yes, beastly.
Oh, bother. Here comes Mr. Saville looking for a tennis partner. Will you play again, or are you too tired?
I'm too tired to play with Saville. Chap always looks dirty to me, greasy bounder.
Don't be silly. Go and talk to Mrs. Bradley, then.
Not I. I'm going to have a squint at your historic dust heap.
I say, Miss Broom, When I was over here last time, your father offered to show me his Rabelais.
Oh, yes, Mr. Saville. I think Father's in the study now.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll go along then.
There are sandwiches and things in the dining room. Please help yourself.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Doctor. You're not going already?
I must. Sorry, Felicity, but I can't stand that woman's company another minute. Of all the nosy, insinuating, interfering...
You mean Mrs. Bradley? She's coming this way.
Oh, then I'm off. Goodbye.
How ill-natured one is always tempted to be when one gossips. Dr. Barnes was thus tempted. He fell.
Did he? Who was the victim this time?
Mrs. Saville.
Oh, you mean Lulu Hurst?
Do I? That's what the doctor seemed anxious to impress upon me. He became quite heated on the subject of the young woman's marital status.
I can't stand any of them up at the cottage on the hill. They're such a queer crowd. Of course, one can understand Cleaver Wright. He's an artist.
Where does he come from?
Somewhere in London.
And now he lives at the cottage on the hill in Wandle's Parlour. Curious. Who gave it that name, by the way? The always correct Mr. Saville?
Yes, I think so. Well, hello, Aubrey. How was the dust heap?
Horrid. I say, what does your pater do with his false teeth?
He doesn't have false teeth.
No, I thought he hadn't. Goodbye.
Well...
Very curious.
Neck bone, your neck bone connected to your head bone. Now hear the word of the Lord.
Dear me, Constance, you do seem to be having difficulties in Wandle's Parlour.
Difficulties? My dear Reginald, we have had the police, we have endured the press, the house has been ransacked, and it is all James's fault.
Oh, come now.
That is why I wish to talk to you, both as bishop and as my brother-in-law.
Well, it's a fine day for a drive. I shall bathe when we get to Ram's Cove.
Reginald.
Oh, very well, Constance. What has James been up to?
I know that James is a favourite with you. I think it is a pity. He has told various lies.
Dear me. What about?
About Rupert. It seems that Rupert did not go to America, and that James concocted a whole series of untruthful explanations in order to conceal the true whereabouts of his unfortunate cousin.
And whereabouts is his unfortunate cousin?
We do not know. It seems that James, in a fit of animal passion, laid violent hands upon his cousin and smote him on the head. The blow caught Rupert under the chin and...
Laid him out. Go on, Constance. You have a decided gift for exposition, you know.
Well, now comes the really mysterious part of the affair. James left his cousin lying prone upon the damp ground at 8 o'clock at night in that horrible place.
I shouldn't have thought the ground could be damp after this long spell of fine weather. But what horrible place do you mean?
I told you. In the midst of the woods, near the Druid's stone. There is blood on the stone where the poor boy struck his head in falling. From that moment, Rupert has never more been seen.
Ah, most enjoyable.
Personally, I think sea bathing unwise. Let me spread out that damp towel. It will soon dry.
Oh, on no account. I have a real treasure wrapped up in it. A brachycephalic skull. A young man on the beach gave it to me.
A skull? Reginald, how extraordinarily unpleasant. Pray move it further away from my person.
I think Broom ought to see it. He knows quite a lot about the Celtic era. We could drive round by the Wandle's Parlour vicarage, couldn't we?
Neck bone, your neck bone connected to your head bone. Now hear the word of the Lord.
But look here, sir, this looks too good to be true.
To be sure, if a nice set of false teeth wouldn't improve the appearance of the creature entirely.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Would you make us a fresh pot of tea, perhaps?
And some more scones, please.
No.
Do sit down, Mrs. Bryce Haringey.
Thank you.
Where did you say you got this skull, Bishop?
A young fellow camping near Ram's Cove found it and gave it to me. Very fine, don't you think?
I should say that it is less than 100 years old.
Rubbish, man.
Well, look, I'll tell you what, let's send for young Cleaver Wright and see if he can reconstruct the thing. He's very clever at modelling.
Neck bone, your neck bone connected to your head bone. Now hear the word of the Lord.
Yes, I see, yes.
Can I take it away with me?
Oh, can't you slap a bit of clay over it now?
Afraid not. All my stuff's up at the cottage, you see. I'll bring it over tomorrow, sure as sure.
Neckbone, your neckbone connected to your headbone. Now hear the word of the Lord.
There you are, Vicar. Rather a curious resemblance, don't you think?
Great Scott!
Glory be to God, 'tis Mr. Setley himself to the life.
Oh!
Disconnect them bones, them. Hurrah, bones, disconnect them bones, them. Hurrah, bones, disconnect them bones, them. Hurrah, bones, now hear the word of the Lord.
Look here, Inspector, you can't prove that I was the last person to see Rupert before he disappeared.
True. What was Mr. Sethley wearing when you walked into the woods together at 5 to 8 on the evening of Sunday, June the 22nd?
I'm not swearing to the time, mind. The date's all right. Rupert was in dark brown, I think.
Passport, sir?
Yeah. It was Sunday evening. A lounge suit.
I see. The colour of the suit was given by Mrs. Bryce Haringay's medium to light grey. And she says it was a pair of flannel trousers supported by a silk scarf and a tennis shirt.
Look here, I'm a man. I don't notice what people wear. My aunt's a woman. She does. But anyway, what difference does it make what he was wearing? I thought you'd made up your minds it was Rupert's body that was in the butcher's shop. Didn't Uncle Reggie find his skull or something?
It's an interesting story, that, sir. The bishop showed the skull to the vicar here at Wandles, and they asked Mr. Cleaver Wright to build the head and face onto it. Very humorous gentleman is Mr. Cleaver Wright. Well, his model was the image, I'm told, of Mr. Sethley, and it's up at the station now.
Good Lord.
At least the bits of it are, for when we broke up the clay, there was nothing but a coconut inside.
That's interesting.
Yes. Mr. Wright says that he was called away to speak to someone at the door while he was modelling the features on the skull. It seems as though someone must have substituted the coconut while he was gone.
Ah.
I wish you'd tell me what passed between you and your cousin that Sunday evening. Did you quarrel?
What if we did? It had no connection with the disappearance. I'll tell you one thing, Inspector. I think you're right about the body being Rupert's. My cousin was more than a bit of a blackguard. I found that out when my aunt and I went through his papers.
Yes, sir. Sethley had enough incriminating evidence against various people to allow him to live in luxury on the proceeds of blackmail for the rest of his life.
Well, there you are, then. One of them has done in, my precious cousin, and a good job, too.
Well, sir, you may be right.
Or if not one of the people whose names have come to light, what about his other unknown victims?
Victims? That's a good word, that is. Victims.
Inspector Grindy! Oh, what a fortuitous meeting. I inquired at the police station, and they said you were here. But I had hoped not to encounter Mrs. Bryce Haringay. I am Mr. Rupert Sethley's solicitor, Theodore Grayling.
Well, I'm very glad to meet you, sir. I assume you have some information about Mr. Sethley?
Well, not exactly. It is just that I think you should find out whether Mr. Redsey was acquainted with the terms of my client's will. Perhaps I ought to say my late client's will.
What about the will, sir?
Well, this is the point. If the will were altered in accordance with a rough draft which Mr. Sethley drew up less than 3 weeks ago, Mr. Redsey would find himself completely disinherited as a result of a serious quarrel between the cousins.
They did quarrel, then. What was the cause, sir? Do you know that?
Money. Mr. Redsey had asked for a loan to enable him to buy a share in a Mexican ranch.
And Sethley refused?
In the roundest terms. Rather a pity, I think, as he could so easily have afforded the money.
Redsey was angry, of course.
Very angry. There were several acrimonious arguments.
And so Mr. Sethley decided to alter his will?
That's it, Inspector. I came down on Monday last and interviewed Mr. Redsey, as my client was not there. A curious feature of the afternoon was Redsey's determination that Mrs. Bryce Haringay and I should on no account approach the vicarage by way of the Manor Woods. He went through the most extraordinary manoeuvres to prevent it.
The Manor Woods, eh? Thanks for the tip, sir.
Oh, a pleasure. Well, I might as well return to town. You are the person I came to see, and...
Mr. Grayling!
Oh,
Mr.
goodbye,
Grayling!
Inspector.
Mr. Grayling! Oh, most unfortunate.
He was trying to catch a train, I believe. Now that you're here, madam, there is just one thing.
So, Grindy, assuming the Bosbury body is that of Rupert Sethley, then young Ridsey had a motive. Two, in fact. The will and Sethley's refusal to lend him money.
Yes, and the opportunity. He seems to be the last person to see Sethley before his disappearance. They were seen walking into the Manor Woods together.
Were they now?
Not only that, but Ridsey tried to establish an alibi by going into the Queen's Head about 9 o'clock that night and getting dead drunk.
Really?
Had to be took home. Now, I figure it out like this. The two cousins went into the woods arguing, and it turns into a fight. Ridsey kills his cousin, hides the body in the bushes, and all Monday he spends his time playing policeman and stopping people from going into the woods. It looks pretty bad.
Yes, I grant that. But how did he get the body from the woods into Bosbury Market and chop it up without someone spotting him?
It must have been done on a Monday night after dark, sir.
But after dark, Grindy, my lad, the market is shut and they drop steel doors over the entrances. Not a cat could squeeze in, let alone a chap carrying a dead body.
Well, what about very early Tuesday morning? The market opens at 6, I suppose.
No, not until 8. And Binks the butcher was in his shop at 9:30.
I see your point. Too risky.
Yes. What I do think ought to be undertaken next is a thorough search of those woods.
Very good, sir. I'll get onto it right away.
Young man!
Oh, hello, Mrs. Bradley.
Tell me why you are not playing golf today.
All the cheery souls here have indicated pretty clearly that they prefer my room to my company. I believe there are rumours current that I murdered my cousin Sethley a short time ago.
Did you?
Well, at one time I thought I had, but I'm glad to say that I was wrong.
This sounds remarkably interesting. May I hear more?
Well, I've made up my mind to spill the yarn to the inspector, so...
So I have come just in time for the dress rehearsal.
Yeah. You see, we had an argument on the Sunday night, Rupert and I got a bit heated and knocked him down.
Yes?
Well, the silly ass had to go and smash his silly head against the trunk of a tree.
A tree? Aha.
Yes. Well, of course, I thought I'd killed him. I didn't know what to do, so I lugged him into the middle of a hazel copse and pelted along to the Queen's Head and got beastly tight.
Indeed.
2 chaps had to cart me home, and my aunt locked me in for the night. So the next night, I went to bury Rupert's body in the middle of the woods, but he wasn't there. So I know I didn't kill him. See what I mean? Well, no time like the present. Hello? Is that Felicity Broom at the gate? I say. You'll let me give you both a lift back to Wandles, won't you?
We'd be delighted. I am very fond of Felicity. She's a dear girl.
Yes, isn't she? Come on, then. And I'll go and talk to Grindy this afternoon.
Oh, nothing here, Inspector.
But, I say, are you sure, Sergeant?
Oh, dead sure. Half a minute. She's struck on something. It's a suitcase, sir.
It can't be.
Let's have it up, Walls.
Right, yeah, sir.
Well, I'm damned. R.S. Rupert Sethley, wouldn't you say, Mr. Haringey?
Yes.
And not locked. And inside...
Crikey, my fish.
Now then, young man, I think you better come clean.
I don't see that the police will have any other choice but to arrest Mr. Ridsey, unless some fresh evidence turns up.
But you can't believe that Jimsy would do anything so horrible.
I don't know whether he killed his cousin, but I don't believe he carved him up, and I think we had better put our heads together to see if we can't prove it. I want to see young Mr. Haringey and his mother, separately if possible, But first, the good doctor, I think.
Enter. Oh, it's you. I must say you don't look very ill.
I am not in the least ill, I am thankful to say. I came to ask if you can think of anywhere that the missing skull might be hidden.
Oh, that. Well, of course, if they brought the thing to me, I could soon have told them whether it was Rupert Sethley's or not. You'd only to try his dental plate in the jaws and see if it would fit.
Quite so he did wear false teeth.
Oh, yes. Would have been an infallible proof, you know, quite infallible. I mean, a man's dental plate, like his fingerprints, can't possibly belong to anyone else.
Oh, Mrs. Bradley, you are so clever. Can't you think of anything that will save James?
Forgive me, but I thought you disliked him.
Oh, yes, of course I do. But it would be so awkward for Aubrey later on if it became known that his cousin had been hanged for murder.
Now then, sit up and attend to me. Who else hated Rupert Sethley besides James, Felicity Broom and darling Aubrey?
Rupert knew that Dr. Barnes had an illegitimate son. Well, that's why I always have a Bosbury doctor when we're staying here.
I see. And the doctor knew that Rupert knew?
Oh, yes. It saved Rupert paying insurance money for the servants, you see. Dr. Barnes treats them free of charge because Rupert didn't tell.
Is Dr. Barnes a surgeon?
He helped to amputate the Major's brother's leg after a hunting accident, and he took out Margaret Summertoll's appendix. At least, everybody said it was her appendix, but I drew my own conclusions. You see, she...
Yes, I see. Most suspicious.
But I fancy Rupert found out about that too. But the doctor didn't kill him. I don't think extremely well of the man, it's true, but...
Quite so. But don't you see that to save James from arrest, we must turn the attention of the police to fresh channels of inquiry?
Yes, I see that, of course. And the doctor being a surgeon... Oh, dreadful man. How glad I am that I refused to call him in when Aubrey contracted the chicken pox 2 summers ago.
Don't disturb yourself, Mrs. Bryce-Haringey. I can see my servant. Aubrey, just the person I wish to see.
I say, Mrs. Bradley, something very rum's happened.
Later, child. First, go upstairs again and bring me the false teeth which you found on the vicarage rubbish heap.
But how did you know?
Elementary, my dear Haringey. Hurry now. Those teeth may be important evidence. The teeth of the evidence, you might say.
That was part 1 of The Mystery of a Butcher's Shop, dramatised by Elizabeth Proud. Mary Wimbush played Mrs. Lestrange Bradley, Richard Pearce, Aubrey Haringey, Christopher Schooler, James Redsey, and David King, the Vicar of Wandles. The part of Felicity Broom was played by Teresa Gallagher, Mrs. Bryce Haringey and Mrs. Noon, Anne Windsor. Cleaver Wright, Christopher Scott, Theodore Grayling, David Monaco, and George William Saville, Terence Edmund. Sonny Ormond played Mary Kate Maloney and Mrs. Willows, Peter Penry Jones, Dr. Barnes, Norman Bird, Superintendent Bidwell, Charles Millam, Inspector Grindy, Eric Allen, the Bishop of Culminster, Elizabeth Proud, You Lady Blenkins, and Ronald Herdman, Sergeant Walls. The play was directed by Sue Wilson. The Mystery of a Butcher's Shop by Gladys Mitchell, dramatised by Elizabeth Proud, with Mary Wimbush as Mrs. Lestrange Bradley, Richard Pearce as Aubrey Haringey, and Christopher Schooler as James Redsey. Rupert Sethley has disappeared, and a body has been found, jointed and hung, in the butcher's shop. Aubrey Haringey is enjoying his amateur sleuthing, and under the watchful eye of Beatrice Lestrange Bradley, the search for the missing skull continues. The Mystery of a Butcher's Shop, Part 2, The Bones of the Matter.
Let.
Fault. Buck up, Felicity. This isn't like you.
Oh.
I say, old thing, I didn't mean anything. Oh, hell. Felicity.
I'm sorry, Aubrey. It's not your fault. It's just...
I know. It's those police Johnnies nosing round all the time, isn't it?
Yes. I'm sure they think that Jim's...
Did for Cousin Rupert. Yes, I'm afraid so too. And they found that bally blood-stained suitcase.
What? Where?
Buried in that hole old Jim dug, just where we decided to put it ourselves.
But we didn't.
No, because some blighter snaffled it. Comic, isn't it? Oh, but they can't prove anything, you know. Old Jim has been absolutely straight with them. Confessed he knocked Rupert out and everything. That ought to count in his favour. If only we could find out who bunked off with the bally suitcase that Monday night.
Why?
Well, don't you see? It must have been the murderer. After all, if old Jim didn't carve up the corpse and hang it in the butcher's shop, and he swears he didn't, and I asked Inspector Grindy and he said Jim had an alibi for the time when they're sure it was done. Well then, it seems to me that Jim couldn't have killed Rupert, but only stunned him, and somebody else had a soft job finishing the poor blighter off.
Yes, but it's Jimsy the police are after. I know it is.
Well, anyway, I'm going to find the man who did the dismembering of the corpse. And that old dame the mater hates so much.
Mrs. Bradley?
Yes, she's working on it too. She's hot.
All right. Well, I know you're a clever boy, Aubrey, and brave too. So, if you want any help, I'll do what I can.
Good man.
Now, I must go and wash my face. Do I look very horrible?
You look all right.
Ah, there you are, Felicity. Have you ever been to the Manor Woods by night to meet a man?
Father, whatever are you talking about?
Well, why did Marjorie Barnes go? She's in my study, by the way. Will her father be very angry?
She's never going to tell Dr. Barnes. He'll eat her.
She's going to tell Inspector Grindy first.
What? Oh, I say. Is it something to do with the murder?
Is what something to do with the murder?
Oh, good afternoon, Mrs. Bradley. Marjorie Barnes has some tale which she says helps to prove James Redsea's innocence. So why don't you all go into the drawing room, and then I can get on with my sermon.
Rupert Cecily was supposed to have been killed on Sunday night, June the 22nd, wasn't he? And at about 9 o'clock, Jim Redsea was in the Queen's Head.
Getting drunk?
Yes. Well, if anybody saw Rupert alive after Jim had gone off and left him for dead, well, I mean, they couldn't think Jim did it then, could they?
No, it would make a difference, of course. Go on, child.
It was all through Father saying don't about men. The first time was when Willie Bailey took me to Bosbury Fair, and Willie is a perfectly nice boy. Anyway, that Sunday night, we'd arranged to be at the Manor Woods at 9:15.
Marjorie.
It was all fairly easy because Mother was on holiday and Father was going up to the Major's. At least that's what he said. So I sneaked off, though I felt rather scared.
Why?
I think it's that horrible stone. I dream about it sometimes, and it's always dripping with blood.
Interesting. Continue.
He insisted we sit down with our backs against the stone, said I was silly to be scared, and he began to tell me stories, fairy tales. Then suddenly he said in a horrible, blood-curdling voice, and the ogre cried. I was so terrified that I just jumped up and ran for all I was worth.
What time was this?
Just after 9 o'clock. I remember hearing the church clock strike.
I see. Well, please go on.
Yes. Well, I couldn't find the path, and I fell over and tore myself on brambles, and then suddenly I came bursting out into the clearing again. And there it was, that horrible stone of sacrifice.
And your friend?
No, he wasn't there. And then I heard this sound quite close, and I saw...
Yes.
What? A man came crawling out of the bushes like a great black slug.
Oh, horrible.
I'm afraid I just ran. Luckily, this time I stumbled onto the path and raced home and went straight to bed.
But who was it?
Well, It must have been Rupert Sethley, still funny in the head from concussion. And if it was, then Jim didn't kill him.
But you don't know that the man was Rupert. You didn't really recognise him.
No, but I'd swear I did if the police asked me. And he did have a frightfully familiar sort of look.
But telling lies for Jim won't help him, Marjorie. And look here, this tale doesn't exactly connect up with Willie Bailey, you know.
That's the whole point, Felicity. It was not Willie Bailey. And it's no use asking me who it was because I won't tell you.
Well, what did you make of that?
Interesting. Marjorie reminds me of somebody. Who is it?
Yes, who is it?
May I come in, Mr. Wright? Not disturbing you, am I?
Well, you ought to pay, really. Look, isn't that beautiful?
Remarkable. Who is the model?
Old Savile.
Really?
Yes, surprising, isn't it? He looks such a worm in his clothes. But take them away, and damn it, the chap's a pocket Hercules. Rippling muscles and all that. Most surprising fellow.
Oh, you know, this is quite an experience for me. I have never seen a studio before. Oh, very interesting. A life-size annotated plan of a human skeleton.
Yes. Yes, old Savile stuck that up and wrote the book of words. Heaven knows why. I find the thing rather revolting, usually turn it round. You might be more interested in these canvases.
And the model of Rupert Sethley's head. Did you make that in here?
That? Oh, yes. Yes, funny business that, you know. I mean, deuce knows what happened to that skull. Most extraordinary thing.
Yes.
In fact, one is very glad one has a complete alibi for the night of Sethley's murder, especially as one is known to have disliked the chap.
A complete alibi? Then you've more than I have, young man.
Yes. Well, I went to the Queen's Head for a nightcap and got embroiled in a row with a great oaf of a farmer called Galloway. Got pretty badly knocked about. Well, never mind.
And you bear Mr. Galloway no malice. That is so nice, I think. Good heavens! Is that Mr. Savile out in the garden? What on earth is he doing?
Burying Lulu's canary, I expect.
Oh.
It died.
But he's wearing a clerical collar.
Yes, believed in dressing the part. Blasphemous devil.
I see. Why, what a lot of silver cups. Sporting trophies, I presume.
Well, saddles mostly.
But you have too, I see. Oh, and there's a belt. How extremely amusing. What are they for?
Oh, boxing. About the only thing I'm good at in the sports line.
Really? You must be clever. Goodbye.
Damn! Damn! Damn!
Hello, Mrs. Bradley. Has the murder driven you to drink?
Impudence is the weapon of the very young. Chastisement is the reply of the extremely old.
How?
I have been confirming my suspicion that Cleaver Wright deliberately picked a fight in the Queen's Head on the evening of the murder.
For an alibi, of course.
More than that. A fight would not have been necessary if an alibi were all.
Oh.
Tell me, if you know, child, whether Rupert Sethley had his flannels made by a tailor or bought them ready-made.
I'll go and dig in his wardrobe. It's a queer thing about grey flannel bags. A chap can almost always wear another chap's greys. I've worn old Rupert's, which are too big in the seat. I've worn old Jim's, which are too big everywhere. And yet, somehow, they seem to look much about the same when you've got them on.
A point which I intend to bring to the immediate notice of Inspector Grindy. And there is also the point that everyone, every male that is, appears to possess a pair. Except Dr. Barnes, who always dresses most formally. I think I shall pay a call on the good doctor.
Well, what is it this time?
Can you give me something for a slight attack of indigestion?
You haven't got indigestion.
Oh, no, I haven't, I'm thankful to say, but my maid has, or else it's homesickness. Her sister has a new baby and she hasn't seen it.
Well, bismuth tablets.
And the grandfather plays bears on the floor to amuse it. Isn't that charming?
Well, I can safely say I shall never play bears on the floor to delight my grandchildren. I never amused Marjorie in any such ponderously inane fashion.
Personally, I think that's a pity. Great black slug, indeed. By the way, Doctor, do you possess a pair of grey flannel trousers?
My dear madam, we have to maintain the dignity of the profession.
I assume that means no.
Here's your bismuth.
What a strange thing consanguinity is, isn't it?
Consanguinity, madam? Never thought about it. Of whom are you thinking in particular?
Oh, my son, Ferdinand Lestrange. And then there's your son, Doctor.
Ferdinand Lestrange. Is he your son? Didn't know. Brilliant man.
Yes, a clever boy. Takes after his mother.
And defended you in a murder trial, didn't he?
And got me off.
Yes. Well,
just one thing. Tell me, are the people who live at the cottage on the hill patients of yours?
None of your business, madam. You should know better. Now, good day.
Flannel trousers. Ah, Mary Kate.
Now what?
Now, what was the question, Mrs. Bradley?
Do you ever
wear... yes. Do I ever wear grey flannel trousers?
Am I to be wearing myself to the bone, trying to get the stains out of 'em where you went shopping for the meat and drip the blood all down yourself?
Blood?
Out of the best English beef. I remember now.
And when was this?
Well, really, I can't... Mary Kate?
Well, indeed, I'm not sure. Was it the night you came home to us all sopping wet and nearly drowned it through walking into the river near Colminster Bridge?
What?
No, that was the same Sunday night as that murder, so I won't forget that day in a hurry.
I should think not. Well, I want those trousers.
Oh, fetch them, would you, Mary Kate?
Did you really walk into the Cullen that evening?
I'm afraid so.
Oh, Mr. Broom, what are you going to do when Felicity marries?
Oh, but Felicity's only a child. She won't marry for years.
She is nearly 21 and she's in love with James Redsey.
Well, really,
And here is the garment itself. Oh, in a sad state of sin entirely.
Dear me, yes. There seems rather a lot of blood for a pound or so of topside of beef, doesn't there?
Yes. And I fancy these stains are not the mark of the beast. They appear to be more like the brand of Cain. What's more, I rather fancy that these trousers once belonged to Rupert Sethley. And as I propose to hand them over to the inspector, you had better try to remember a little more about them.
Oh, sure.
Now I want a word with Felicity about the laundry.
Laundry? Well, we sent things down to the cottage on the hill, to the unspeakable Lulu.
Lulu Hurst, otherwise Mrs. Saville. Well.
Yes. She used to work in a laundry before she became an artist's model.
Good. And now I want to know more about this suitcase.
Oh, dear. Well, Father borrowed it from Mr. Sethley for our holiday in May, but I was under the impression that he had returned it.
What gave you that impression?
Well, when we came back, Father put it on the landing, because seeing it would remind him to return it. Now, he didn't unpack until I reminded him that his collars and things must be washed.
By Lulu Saville? Nay, Hurst.
Yes. One of his clerical collars is missing, by the way.
Is it indeed? I want to ask my friend Mary Kate something. Mary Kate!
And what will you be after this time, Mum?
I want a piece of string and a large sheet of brown paper.
In this house? Sure, St. Michael and all his angels couldn't be finding string and brown paper hereabouts without they'd be bringing it with them.
Oh, I see. So you just pushed the laundry into the suitcase and sent it up to Mrs. Lulu. And when would that have been?
The Thursday, Ma'am. The Thursday before the murder, God save us all.
Forward, children. Straight to the stone of sacrifice. Aubrey first, Mr. Redsey next. I will come last. Ah, the Druid's stone. Oh, yes, it reeks of evil. Now, Mr. Redsey, take Aubrey over to the spot where you knocked your cousin down.
Right you are. Here.
But lie down, boy.
Like this?
No, get your head round to the left a bit more. Stick. That's right.
Thank you. And now, haul him into the bushes. Ow! Oh, by the arms, was it? And now, you, Mr. Redsey, go off in the direction of the Queen's Head at the pace which you took on that Sunday night.
Oh, right you are. Goodbye.
Oh, never mind. He's done all that I wanted him to do. Now, Aubrey, I want you to crawl out of those bushes into the clearing. No, slowly. Oh. You're not feeling very well after you struck your head against a tree. Oh, that's right. And you're wearing a white shirt and light grey flannel trousers. Well, I should have asked you to take your blazer off, child. Never mind. And it's 8 o'clock on a fine midsummer evening. Oh. No, 9:15 on a fine midsummer evening. Oh, yes, quite so. Well, get up. Black slug indeed. Oh, I'll buy you some new flannels, boy, if you've spoilt those. Well, now we'll try again. Go back into the bushes and lie down as you did before.
Right you are.
Yeah. Oh, do you mind removing your blazer first? No. Thank you so much. Now, you are unconscious. I am the person for whom the police are looking. I've seen Redsey drag you into the bushes and dash away. I search the bushes and discover you lying prone upon the ground. Now, you keep still. You're unconscious, remember? I seize you by the heels. Oh, yes, I really must buy some new flannels for you. I drag you out into the clearing. There. I examine you. It occurs to me that I hate and fear you, that it's a golden opportunity to be rid of you forever. I gag you with your own shirt, in case you should recover consciousness before I decapitate you. You won't be cold, you've your vest. Now then, I secure your wrists with your own belt. No, kick out hard if that shirt hurts too much. Then I put my foot against the soles of your shoes, seize your bound wrists and jerk you into a sitting position. Then I slip your bound wrist over my head and straighten myself. Oh, heavens, what a length you are, child. And I carry you over to the stone of sacrifice, and I lay you out on top of it. Then I hack off your head. No, not really. Cheer up. Some blood runs down the stone. Yes, some staining, but not enough. Oh, poor boy, you are rather uncomfortable. There, let it get me. There.
I say, you are hefty.
Are you willing to conclude the little drama?
You bet.
Oh, good. Well, I wonder what to do next. Suddenly, I hear voices. A man and a girl are approaching.
Marjorie.
I lay the body on the ground. Here, I think, but the exact spot isn't important. I pick up the gag, that is the shirt, and take the head away with me. Oh, I also take away the belt.
Old Rupert generally wore a silk scarf on grey bags.
Oh, indeed. It's easier to tie him up, then. Did he buy his flannels ready-made?
No, had them tailored.
Oh, thank you. That simplifies matters.
Look out!
Oh, heavens! What was that? Was it?
Good Lord.
Oh, my arrow almost killed you. My dear Mrs. Bradley, I scarcely dare hope that you'll accept my apologies. This is what comes of practicing for amateur theatricals.
Oh, what a charming costume, Mr. Savile. Do let me hold your longbow so that we can see you in all your glory. Oh, green suits you. I particularly like the feathered cap. Robin Hood to the life, don't you think so, Aubrey?
Jolly fine.
I'm so glad you like it. I was actually on the other side of the road, but when I observed that the arrow had flown into the Manor Woods, I hurried over to make certain no damage had been done.
Liar.
Are you also acting in a play?
Oh, yes, yes. A very modern play. I'm sorry the full cast isn't here. Aubrey was playing the villain, and I... the innocent victim. Oh, must you go?
Yes, I...
Goodbye.
It's nothing to laugh at. He nearly killed you.
I wonder. Boys will be boys, you know.
If you want George or Cleaver, they're out.
I called on behalf of the Church Restoration Fund. Miss Hurst?
Yes?
Ah.
Oh, that. Yes, it wants doing up bad, don't it? I give up going because of the draft. Mind you, I only went to hear Cleaver sing.
Oh, Mr. Wright is a churchgoer.
Oh, yes, he goes regular. Lovely voice.
And you, I understand, obliged by doing the vicarage laundry.
Oh, that.
Miss Broom says that you lost one of her father's collars about a month ago.
I never. That pop-eyed swine I goes with done it. Snatches the iron and starts dabbing it on stuff. Spoilt the collar, so I had to chuck it away. Some underclothes went the same way, and who'd washed them that week? Blowed if I know, for I never.
I see. And what shape was this collar?
One of them soft collars they wear on tennis shirts.
Really? And you're sure it was not one of Mr. Wright's collars or Mr. Saville's?
Look here, what is all this? You'd better not come nosing about in what don't concern you. There's one man dead for me already, and I don't...
And another will be hanged if you don't keep silent.
So, I've caught you out at last, you dirty little slut!
Oh, it's you, Mrs. Bradley. I thought...
Marjorie! Marjorie, I want a plain answer to a plain question. The man who met you in the Manor Woods that night was Cleaver Wright, wasn't it?
I promised I wouldn't tell.
You haven't told, I have guessed. You see, he walked round the stone after you ran away and saw the dead body of Rupert Sethley.
But how could Cleaver have seen Rupert Sethley's dead body? Because I saw him alive. I told you. He came crawling out of the bushes like a great black slug.
So you said before. You're certain it wasn't a bear, I suppose.
Well, Mrs. Bradley, you've won the first round. The teeth are certainly Mr. Sethley's. Now what?
I should say, produce the skull and find out whether the teeth ever fitted its jaws.
The skull? Ah, we've looked everywhere for that blessed head, but it's gone.
Oh, come, Inspector. I dare say we can make up our minds where it's to be found. Where is the best place to hide a thing, James Redsey?
Where it has been looked for already. Try the old butcher's shop again.
Clever boy. Will your car carry 4, Inspector? I dare say Superintendent Bidwell would like to come too. Now then, where do butchers throw all the odd bits and bones?
In the drawer under the chopping block. Here we... Oh. By Jove! It is too! What about this, Grindy?
Them bones gonna walk around, them bones gonna... Them bones gonna walk around, now here's the word of the law.
But how did you know?
We have quite a number of strangely constructed persons, psychologically speaking, living amongst us. First, the Stephen Broom.
The vicar?
Yes, my dear. A man who thrusts clocks into his pocket and is as appallingly absent-minded as that poor dear man is a very pretty study for a psychoanalyst.
Good Lord.
And then there's your own mother. She had a very good motive for getting rid of both Sethley and Redsey.
Hang it all.
If Sethley were murdered and Redsey hanged, you, young man, would be heir to the family property.
Yes, but the mater...
And then there are the two young men who live at the cottage on the hill. Cleaver Wright is just the sort of person who would think it funny to hang human joints on hooks. And he could have stolen the skull from his own studio most convincingly.
Yes, still, jolly difficult to see how he could have done the actual murder. He had a pretty sound alibi.
How do you know that?
Marjorie Barnes. Made me swear to keep Mum when her pater was about there. I say, I suppose he wasn't the jolly old murderer.
I was coming to Dr. Barnes. Doctors have been known to commit these crimes. Oh, the trouble is he doesn't possess a pair of grey flannel trousers.
I say... Does that mean you know who the murderer is?
I know that the man who moved the skull to the butcher's shop was a man in a panic, and the murderer feels perfectly secure. And upon my word, if I didn't feel certain that the police will sooner or later make out a case against some innocent person, I'd leave him in peace. Rupert Sethley
asked for it. Yes, he did, didn't he?
Someone doesn't confess to the murder and have done with it.
Oh, I don't know why one should confess. Oh, yes, just a little milk, thank you.
Well, I wonder they don't pay more attention to Mr. Saville. He has no alibi, has he?
Oh, no, child. And psychologically it would be possible for such a man to commit such a murder, and I told the inspector so.
The police don't worry about psychology. Seem to catch a good many murderers there.
And hang 'em, too.
Is that a challenge?
If you like.
Very well. The police are usually guided by what is known as circumstantial evidence. Sometimes it leads them right and sometimes entirely wrong.
For instance?
For instance, according to the police point of view, Sethley was not dead when James fled from the woods to the public house. They think he was only stunned.
So do I.
I now come to a remark made by Marjorie Barnes.
Really? Oh, but
now,
I'm sure...
Marjorie saw a man crawling out of some bushes near the stone of sacrifice. Afterwards, she assumed that it must have been Sethley. I refuse to believe this for two reasons. First, she didn't actually recognize the man, and second, her words were, and a man came crawling out of the bushes like a great black slug. Very well. Now, at 9 o'clock on a midsummer night, it is very far from dark, light enough to play tennis, for example. Well, Sethley was wearing a white tennis shirt and light grey flannel trousers.
Aha! If Marjorie had really seen old Rupert, you mean she couldn't have thought he looked black?
Exactly. Beware of the fact which refuses to fit.
Then who was it?
Well, it might have been your father.
Father? Oh, but he was at the Major's.
Oh, very well, that's a thing that can be proved. Go on.
I can't think of anybody else. Oh, yes,
The vicar? Well, his clothes are certainly black enough, and he asked for it just now. We will try our circumstantial evidence on him.
Really?
Mr. Broom, where were you on the evening of Sunday, June the 22nd?
Went for a walk, I expect. I generally do after church.
Where?
Oh, round and about, you know.
We'll assume he went for his walk in the Manor Woods.
No.
Now then, the vicar leaves the church and enters the Manor Woods, just in time to see the cousins quarrel and fight. He assumes that Sethley is dead, and when James has fled, the vicar parts the bushes and has a look at the man he loathes.
The man he loathes?
Well, of course, everybody who met him seems to have detested Rupert Sethley. Why should the vicar be any exception?
Well, he's a vicar.
Oh, rubbish.
Go on, don't mind me. I shall go to sleep as soon as I've finished this pipe.
By the way, do you carry your tobacco in a pouch?
Used to.
What do you use now? Never mind. To continue. When the vicar found Sethley, he had an unpleasant shock.
He found that Sethley wasn't dead.
Thereupon, he helped him out of the bushes, and Sethley lay down on the stone of sacrifice to recover. The sight of his prostrate form incensed the vicar to the point of madness. He drew out his penknife and stabbed Sethley in the throat.
What nonsense!
Well, then he heard voices. Marjorie Barnes and Cleaver Wright. He lowered the body to the ground and hid. Well, when Marjorie ran off, Mr. Wright walked round the stone, found the body and knelt to examine it, thus getting blood on his trousers. Now, the corpse had bled from the neck. There was no blood probably on Sethley's trousers, grey flannels, you recall. Wright is quick-witted. He drags off Sethley's trousers, pulls off his own flannels, Marjorie.
Yes, he was wearing flannels that evening.
Yes, I knew it. He then put on Sethley's trousers and went to the Queen's Head, where he picked a quarrel with young Galloway and got himself so badly knocked about that no one would suppose any blood on his person to be other than his own.
Brains. Bright man.
Oh, I agree. Though it was not so bright to expect me to believe that someone who has won cups and belts for boxing is going to let himself be punched on the nose by a clumsy ox like Galloway. However, back to the vicar. He realized that since Wright had seen the body, it had to be disposed of. So he crawled out of his hiding place towards the body, and it was then that Marjorie saw him. When she had gone, he lifted the body, he's a very strong man, remember, and carried him into his own garden.
How dare you say such a thing?
You will remember that I am reconstructing on circumstantial and not upon psychological evidence. He laid the body down in the empty pigsty and then realized that there was a quantity of blood on his own clothes. So he sallied forth again and deliberately walked into the River Cullen, dropped the incriminating knife, dropped the dead man's clothes, which he weighted with stones.
A handful of flints placed in the middle of the shirt, the collar and tie thrown on top, the shirt gathered up like a bag and tied round with string.
And then he returned to Wandle's parlour and informed his daughter and Mary Kate that he had absent-mindedly walked into the river. They prepared a hot bath for him and believed implicitly the tale he told them. Oh, dear child, would you rather I stopped?
Oh, good gracious, no. I know it's only a joke. It just sounds rather horrid to me.
Oh, well, of course it does. I won't go on.
Oh, but I want to hear the rest. Oh, you better go away, Felicity, and don't spoil other people's pleasure.
I'm glad you're enjoying yourself.
Go on, Mrs. Bradley. Corpse in pigsty, vicar in bath, Rupert missing. What next?
Next is where the rest of the circumstantial evidence comes in.
What, the butcher's shop business?
Simple. You see, the butcher's assistant belongs to the Vicar's Boys' Club, which is held in Bosbury on Mondays. Cleaver Wright often lends the vicar his car for the journey, so he could have taken the body to the shop with the utmost ease, having stolen the key from the assistant's pocket during running practice.
Good heavens!
And lastly, at this very instant, he is in possession of a silver tobacco case, which was once the property of the murdered man. Stephen Broom, I knew this passion of yours for putting things in your pockets would get you into trouble one day.
Oh, dear.
The trouble is, Grindy, Redsea is the chap with a really strong motive.
What about the doctor, eh? And Mrs. Bryce Haringey, eh? And Saville. That wife of his, Lulu Hurst, as good as told Mrs. Bradley that Sethley was her lover. There's one man dead for me already, she said.
What was that about the doctor?
Blackmail.
Oh, that illegitimate son business. What of it?
Well, a doctor, you know. Got to be pretty careful.
Was it ever proved, though?
Cleaver Wright. Don't you spot the likeness?
Well, now you mention it.
Unmistakable once you got onto it. And, of course, Cleaver's been sponging on the doctor ever since he's been here.
Has he?
Rumour says so. Worth looking into, sir.
Then there's the question of Saville, a very vexed question.
But he hadn't any reason for hating old Rupert.
Hadn't he? Ask Lulu Hurst. Jealousy, my child.
Oh? Oh, I see.
Yes. And Saville is neat and tidy to a fault. It was a very tidy person who left the butcher's shop in such good order. And he has a curious kink in his mentality. Have you observed it, child?
I've observed he's a greasy swine.
I discovered him once interring a small dead bird, and he was wearing a clergyman's collar. Ritual, you see. Surely you noticed the Robin Hood suit when he nearly shot me in the Manor Woods?
Yes, but he said he was rehearsing for a play.
Oh, rehearsing my foot. He was dressed for the part he was playing in his imagination, and that's why I think he must be the butcher. You see, to him a dead body would signify meat. Meat is cut into joints. Very well. He cuts it into joints.
But that's a bit of a skilled job, you know.
Oh, undoubtedly. But Saville had a chart in his studio. It depicts a human body with the skeleton marked in black and fainter lines showing the shape of the flesh on the bones. Oh, fascinating. And then there's the stone, the centre of weird and wonderful legends. It may even once have been a sacrificial altar, as its name suggests. And I wonder whether the urge to offer a human sacrifice upon it would not be motive enough for a mind like that of Saville.
Then he could have been the chap who snaffled the suitcase when I'd gone up to the house.
Undoubtedly.
But I say, wouldn't all this about Saville apply pretty equally to Cleaver Wright?
Well, Wright is certainly shielding somebody, but I rather fancy he's shielding somebody who is not the murderer.
You know, I feel an awful muddle about all this. Do you know who the murderer is?
I'm not quite prepared to answer that question, but... Oh, I wish I knew whether Saville meant to shoot that arrow at me.
Well, if not, why did he...
Oh, glory be to God, Mrs. Bradley, Mum. Do you be running over to the vicarage with all your legs this day? Sure, and this poor Mr. Saville does be hanging by his braces from the woodshed door entirely.
Well, I'm glad it's entirely. I'm bored to death by limbs and joints. What's come over him that he should do a silly thing like that?
Well, Mr. Ritzy, we've made our arrest.
Saville, I suppose. You've dragged him out of hospital into the lockup.
Well, sir, no. Mr. Saville is recovering in the cottage hospital, under observation, of course. No, as a matter of fact, after I'd heard that comic fairy tale Mrs. Bradley was handing out to you all in her garden, I got quite one or two new ideas.
But how the deuce did you hear her ideas?
I was behind that clump of laurels, at Mrs. Bradley's invitation, and I certainly got a knockout over that silver tobacco case. But it seems as though the vicar must have,
acquired it?
Yes, and a long time before the murder.
Yes, but...
Anyway, Cleaver Wright broke down and confessed he'd seen a headless corpse. Then we had a look at the trousers, which he'd been wearing on and off ever since the murder. They were Sethleys, tailor's mark on them and everything. Well, the suitcase affair was a bit tricky. I'm not sure I've got it right now, but it seems as though Mary Kate sent some laundry in it to the cottage on the hill, and the murderer pinched it from there and used it to transport the dismembered body to the butcher's shop. Oh, and he destroyed the rest of Sethley's clothes by scorching them with Mrs. Lulu's iron. Had ample opportunity because he was very sweet on the lady and used to visit her as often as he could. Wonderful how many patients a country practitioner can acquire, was your word, sir, I think?
Country practitioner?
Dr. Barnes, sir. He's the chap we've arrested. If you take Mrs. Bradley's fairy story and say doctor, where she said vicar, you'll be about right, I reckon. Particularly the slug business.
How much?
The man who came crawling out of the bushes like a great black slug. That was Dr. Barnes.
Yes, of course it was. What can you expect of a man who has never played bears with his children?
Never what?
Look here, Mrs. Bradley. I'm damned if I can make this business out. Now, we all knew that you were joking about the vicar, but really, to push the murder onto Dr. Barnes seems almost as bad.
Oh, it's ridiculous, James. The doctor is not a tidy man. Is it tidy to have illegitimate children all over the place? Is it tidy to have affairs with the Lulu Hursts of this world? No. And the motive, Inspector. The poor man had no motive. Everybody knew his secret. Wasn't a secret at all. No, the man who cut up that body is tidy. He's a maniac for tidiness. Well, the doctor's a fool, but he's not a madman. Set him free.
Well, I'm damned. Madman? But who can it be?
The person who puts on a clerical collar when he's going to inter a little dead bird, who assumes a suit of Lincoln green when he's practising archery.
Ah, telephone call for you, Inspector.
Ah, thank you.
Mrs. Bradley, I was going to ask you something about that arrow, you know.
Oh, so you were, child. What about it?
Well, Why did Savile tell a lie about where he was standing when he shot him?
Did he tell a lie?
Of course. Said he was in the woods on the other side of the road. Couldn't have been. The arrow was less than 6 feet from the ground and travelling in a straight line. Hadn't been fired from more than 20 yards off, I should say.
By heavens, Holmes, this is wonderful. Inspector, will anything short of a miracle convince you that the doctor is innocent and that Savile dismembered the body of Rupert Setley?
Savile? But that's just it, Mrs. Bradley. He's done it on us.
What happened?
Savile escaped from his bed in the cottage hospital and jumped from a top-floor window.
Not dead?
As a doornail. Mucking up my case like that. Anyway, I'd better be getting along to the hospital, if you'll excuse me.
I'll see you out, Inspector.
I say, Mrs. Bradley, why was Dr. Barnes in the woods that night, anyway?
Meeting Lulu Hurst, child.
Oh, I see. So he has an alibi?
Of a sort. Certainly for the butcher shop business. Savile, of course, was looking for Lulu when he came across Setley in the woods. Aubrey, what will Mr. Redsea do now that he's cleared of suspicion?
Stay here, I should think. The house goes to him, you know, and there's Felicity to be considered.
What do you mean, he'll marry her?
Be practically a breach of promise if he doesn't, considering how the poor kid howled when she thought he might be arrested.
You are indelicate, child. And what does she want for a wedding present?
No idea.
But you could find out.
Yes, I suppose so. Now, you mean?
Why not? Besides, I want a word with Mr. Redsea on his own.
Oh. I'll toddle over to the vicarage, then.
Well, that's that, I suppose.
Is it?
Well, the police will conclude that Savile did the murder, won't they? Now the poor blighter's dead.
I hope so, sincerely. For your sake.
What do you mean?
That although Savile planned the murder, he never committed it. A fact which, out of aunt-like affection for yourself, I have endeavoured to relegate to the background. I've not actually told a lie about it, but still, there it is. Savile cut up the body. Yes, he stole the murdered man's clothes, yes. But he decapitated a dead man.
Look here. Are you calling me a murderer? You'd better not.
Do not threaten me, James. Threats are so wearing to the threatener. Think of Felicity Broom and conserve your energies.
But what are you going to do?
Nothing. If I'd been going to give you away, I should have done it long ago. However, that punch of yours which knocked Setley down most certainly caused his death. Never had the least doubt of that. Still, morally, of course, Savile was guilty. And he very nearly succeeded in killing me.
That was the final episode of The Mystery of a Butcher's Shop, dramatised by Elizabeth Proud. Mary Wimbush played Mrs. Lestrange Bradley, Richard Pearce, Aubrey Haringey, Christopher Schooler, James Redsea, and David King, the Vicar of Wandles. The part of Felicity Broom was played by Teresa Gallagher, George William Savile, Terence Edmund, Cleaver Wright, Christopher Scott, Dr. Barnes, Peter Penry Jones, and Marjorie Barnes, Jane Whittenshaw. Charles Millam played Inspector Grindy, Norman Bird, Superintendent Bidwell, Sonny Ormond, Mary Kate Maloney, and Petra Markham, Lulu Hurst. The play was directed by Sue Wilson.
Alma Victoria Rattenbury, you were charged with the murder of Francis Mawson Rattenbury on March the 28th, 1935. Are you guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Edith Amelia Davenport, take the book in your right hand and read what is on this card.
I do solemnly swear by Almighty God that I will well and truly try the issues joined between our sovereign lord the King and the prisoner at the bar, and will give a true verdict according to the evidence.
A jury summons? My dear, how too frightful. Let's see. Present yourself, jury service. 15 days. And fail not at your peril, indeed.
Yes, rather scaring, that. Peril of what, do you think? Hard labour or the stocks or just a ducking?
Whopping great fine, I should think. Might almost be worth paying it. I'll get Henry to cough out the necessary, if you like.
Certainly not. I'm quite looking forward to it, as it happens.
What, a whole fortnight?
Well, I've got the time these days. And who knows, I might do a bit of good for some old soul who snitched a pair of silk stockings from Barker.
It's more likely to be indecent exposure.
Well, they wouldn't have women on those juries, would they?
My dear, they have women on everything these days.
Well, if it is that, I'll just have to face it like... well, like a man, I suppose. But I'm not going on that date. I'm not going to mess up Tony's Christmas halls. I'll ask for a postponement to May. That should be safe.
Is he enjoying himself in Cannes?
Tony? He says so in his postcards. But I expect they're written under John's supervision. Thank heavens it's the last time.
You're still determined on the divorce?
Yes, quite.
Well, you know what I think.
A separation doesn't give me custody.
You won't get complete custody.
Oh, yes, I will. John won't defend it. He's too scared of his undersecretary. It'll all be fixed out of court. If he does defend it, I'll win.
There was only that one woman, wasn't there?
Oh, no. In the 5 years before we separated, I found out there were at least 2 others. And now there's this dreadful woman.
Still, 4 in 5 years. It doesn't really make him Bluebeard, you know. In fact, for most husbands with unwilling wives, I'd say it was about par for the course.
You're trying to make it my fault again.
Well, he was only about 40, wasn't he, when you started having headaches? That is a bit young, darling, for the husband to find himself in the spare room.
I couldn't go on, Stella, I told you. I never did care much for that side of things, as you know. And as he got older, he got more and more demanding.
That's one thing I could never say about Henry.
He used to say that my reluctance made him want it more. Now, you can't say that's normal, Stella.
I suppose not. I just wonder if it would work with Henry. How does Tony feel about it all? He always seemed quite fond of his father.
Well, he was. Of course, now I've told him the truth. Not all of it, of course, just enough. He's beginning to see things my way. Unless he's been led astray these last 2 weeks. I wouldn't put anything past that man. I really hate him.
There should be a car waiting to pick me up. The name's Davenport. Would you put that case down there? Come back for the other.
Very good, sir.
Well, Tony, I'm afraid this is goodbye.
Dad, I will be seeing you again, won't I?
I'm afraid that depends on your mother.
I see. Can I ask one thing?
Yes?
Mum always talks to me, well, sometimes talks to me, about that woman, etc., etc.
Yes?
Well, there isn't any of that woman, is there? I mean, I've been with you 2 weeks and I'm not half-witted.
No, you're not.
You still love Mum, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Dad, is there any that woman?
Found your car, sir. Do you want the other case in the boot?
No, my son's travelling by the bus, so...
Yes, sir. I'll get him a place.
Could you get him a seat next to the driver?
Certainly, sir.
Thank you.
Well, goodbye, Tony.
Thank you for a marvellous time.
A bit dull, I'm afraid.
Not Cam, it was smashing.
You didn't like Paris?
Well, now don't think me ungrateful, Dad, but... Well, you did promise to take me to a... Oh, you know... That House of All Nations.
Tony, I did remember. It's just that... Well, you have to take a passport, you see.
A passport to a brothel?
They're very strict about underage.
Oh, Dad. Even in France? I'll have to try Turkey or somewhere.
Why Turkey? Why not here? Jermyn Street?
I thought of that. And I'm a bit... Well...
I'm not serious. At least not yet. I should give it another year or two, old chap, I think, don't you?
But, Dad, I'm 17.
Yes, but that's still a bit young, don't you think? My first wasn't until I was 20. But still, when you do go, for God's sake, take precautions, won't you?
What?
Got your place, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well...
Dad, what should I tell Mum about that woman?
Tell her you never met her, but that I was always talking to her on the telephone. It's a question of her pride. Off you go now, Tony.
Yes? What is it?
I've come about the advert.
You're too old.
It says 14 to 18.
I know what it says. I wrote it myself. You're too old.
I'm 17.
You're still not what we're wanting. Sorry.
Who is it, Irene?
The boy about the advert. He's wrong.
What?
He's too old.
I'm not. I'm only 17.
But he looks much older.
I'll come down.
I'm sending him away.
Keep him.
You better come in. You're not the type at all.
I'll just slip into something. I won't be a mo. Tell him to go into the lounge, Irene, and make himself comfortable.
You heard her. You know.
You the maid?
Companion.
You don't like me, do you?
I've got nothing against you. You're just not the type, that's all.
That'll be for her to say, won't it?
Yes, it will.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. I don't mind anyone reading my music.
Oh, I don't read music. Did you say your music?
Look at the front.
That's a picture of you.
Taken a long time ago, I'm afraid. It's 12 years old, that photograph.
Dark-haired Marie. Is that you, Miss Lausanne?
Oh, no, that's just my pen name. It's just the name I put on my songs. My real name's Alma. What's yours?
Wood.
A Christian name?
Purse. Well, Percy, really. But my dad calls me Purse. So, Purse.
What's your dad do for a living?
He's a builder. Laid off. I work for him when he's got work, but there's not much about these days.
Oh, I know. It's terrible, this slump. I can't sell a song these days for love nor money. Let me take your cap.
Thank you, miss.
By the way, it's Mrs. Mrs. 3 times over, as it happens.
God, divorce.
Yes, once. The other one died. Now 7 years gone with old rats. Mr. Rattenbury, my present one. I'm giving things away, aren't I? I started very young. I've a boy of 13, almost as old as you. Yes, well, I suppose it's working on all those building sites that's made you so developed.
I bike a lot, too.
Yes, that does do wonders for the physique. You're quite what I would call full-grown.
Your Irene thought I was too full-grown.
Yes, well, we concocted that advertisement together, and what she had in mind was rather a smaller kind of boy. You'd be under her, really, not me. Well, I'd better tell you what the wages are. It's one of the reasons we wanted a little boy. I'm afraid my husband will only go to £1 a week.
Living in?
No, I'm afraid not. We haven't room, really. There's only one other room besides Irene's, and my 2 boys. I've another little one, only 6. Well, they're in there during school holidays, that is. Of course, if you'd been a little boy like I meant in the advert, you could have slept in there with them. I mean, if you'd been a really little boy. But being as you are, and me and Irene slipping about upstairs with next to nothing on, well, it would be rather awkward, wouldn't it? No, I'm afraid living in's quite out of the question.
I was only asking. Where does old Rat sleep?
Oh, you mustn't call him that. You must call him Mr. Rattenbury, like Irene.
Yeah? Where does he sleep?
Inquisitive, aren't you? That's quite all right. I like an inquiring nature. Mr. Rattenbury sleeps through there. He can't do the stairs anymore.
I see.
Well, is it a go or isn't it?
OK.
Well, I'm glad that's settled. Why don't we have a little drinky on it?
I'm afraid I don't drink.
I expect that's just what you tell all your employers. Gin and it?
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Fancy anyone not knowing what a gin and it is. Why don't you just try a sip, just to seal our little arrangement?
If you insist.
Oh, I don't insist. I never insist. But just this once. Has to be a first time for everything, doesn't there?
Yeah.
A little of what you fancy is my motto, and a very good one, too. This is a lovely world we're in, and we're put into it to enjoy it. Don't you agree?
I might. I don't think my dad would. He's religious.
Well, our dear Lord didn't say we mustn't have fun, did he? He turned water into wine, not wine into water. Just you tell that to your dad next time he gets narky. And he said we must love each other. And I think we should. Well, Perce? No, I can't call you Perce or Percy. Have you got a middle name?
George.
That's nice. I'm going to call you that. George.
Mrs. Rattenbury.
Alma. Not just now. Always.
Alma.
George.
Ugh.
I'm not letting you have any more. Not having anyone say I'm leading you astray. Oh, it's like water to me. Do you know what Alma means in Latin? A professor told me once. It means life-giving, bountiful. In olden times, they used it about goddesses like Venus. Well, I'm not Venus, God knows. But apparently it also means kind and comforting. And that I am, George. Though I say so, who shouldn't? Here's rats. I better warn you, you'll have to shout. Had a nice walkie?
There was an east wind. You should have told me.
Poor thing. Did you get chilled?
Blasted to buggery. Get me a whiskey, would you?
Bit early for your whiskey, isn't it?
It's a bit early for your gin.
I only meant you don't usually have whiskey in the mornings.
I don't usually get blasted to buggery in the morning. Shares are down again.
Oh, dear. You're probably wondering who the stranger is.
No, I wasn't. But who is he?
His name is George Wood, and he's the new help.
Irene said a boy.
Well, he is a boy. He's only 17.
Has he any references?
No, sir. I've never done this kind of work before.
What?
That's quite all right, dear. We had a nice long interview. I'll vouch for him.
Does he drive?
Yes, sir. I've got a licence.
Well, isn't that marvellous? Isn't that handy, dear? We got ourselves a chauffeur.
No uniform.
No, of course not. Let it go now. I'm just showing the new help to the front door. I'll be back in a jiffy. Well, that's settled, thank goodness. It's lovely about your driving. Go and buy yourself a cab. Here's 15 shillings. Would that be enough?
Should be.
Mummy, there's a smashing bike outside with low handlebars. Oh, is it yours, sir?
Yeah, a rally.
I was going to ask if I could ride it.
Afraid I'm just leaving.
Oh, but he's coming back tomorrow. And every day afterwards. He's going to be one of the family.
Oh, good.
I'm sure if you ask him very nicely, he'll let you ride it.
You bet.
Oh, thanks awfully, sir. Mummy, when's lunch?
It's quite soon, darling.
Irene!
Sweet, isn't he? I really am very blessed with my children.
He called me sir.
What? Oh, they teach him that at his school. Don't worry, he'll soon be calling you George.
I'd rather he went and called me sir.
I'll see that he does then. Well, goodbye then. I'll see you tomorrow.
What time?
What time, Irene?
7. Not a second later.
Can you manage 7?
Easy. I'll be seeing you.
You'll have my notice at the end of the week.
Yes, darling, I'm sure I will.
I'm serious.
You always are. He can drive, Irene, which is more than any of your little teenies could have done.
Yes. There's something else he can do my little teenies couldn't.
Irene!
Anyway, you owe me 4 weeks' wages.
£6? Oh, dear. And there's Christopher's new cricket bat. And Rats is in a bad mood. Still, he's got a large whiskey in him. Think of something for me.
Oh, I don't know.
Pray for me.
Yes.
Well, Rats, darling, let me get you another little drinky. There's time for one before lunch. I've been showing George the car.
Who's George?
Our new chauffeur, darling. He says it's in spanking condition except just for one little thing. It needs a new carburettor. Says if we don't get one, the car might seize up altogether, and that would mean a new car, darling.
Well, We'll have to walk then, won't we?
Oh, you are a scream.
Oh, it's too strong.
Now, after lunch, we're going to get your checkbook out and write out a little check.
I won't sign it.
Oh, yes, you will, my dear. You're far too kind and loving a husband not to. Oh, I do love my darling brats.
Mum, listen to this. Did you know that Mrs. Rattenbury and Wood battered old Rattenbury on the head so hard that they completely smashed his skull?
What? Oh, you're reading about that awful murder. A few years ago, a case like that wouldn't even be mentioned in the Times. Be a darling.
That's what makes it so funny. Happening in Bournemouth.
I don't see that that's funny.
On Aunt Stella's doorstep, and ours, when we get that house. I wonder what their defence will be. Wood's statement says he was doped on cocaine, and the police said that Mrs. Rattenbury was as drunk as a fly.
Tony, I don't want you to talk about it. And you shouldn't be reading it. Haven't you your homework to do?
Finished. Mum, can I ask a question?
Of course.
If you'd found out, before you'd started the divorce, that there wasn't another woman at all with Dad, would it have made any difference?
But there is another woman.
No, there isn't. I'm sure there isn't. And I honestly think he'd come back if you asked him.
On his terms.
Well, I don't know what they are.
I can't explain it to you, darling. You're far too young to understand.
That isn't true. Please believe me, I understand much more than you know.
Is Randolph coming here or you're going to him?
He's coming here.
Is 10 shillings enough?
It's plenty.
And for the cinema, too?
Well, it's only the Kensington.
What's the film?
I don't remember the title. It's got Irene Dunn.
That should be very nice. You haven't told me yet how you like my new dress.
I was spiffing. Mama, who are you out to impress?
Stella's coming to take me to have dinner with General and Lady Whitworth.
Oh, yes. And they're important because of the new house or something.
He's chairman of the Bournemouth Country Club, which owns the whole estate. He's a terrible old snob, according to Stella, so I expect it'll be an excruciating evening.
Is it worth it?
Oh, yes, darling, it's a lovely little house. Quite perfect for just the two of us. So I'll have to be a good girl and say all the right things. They're determined only to let in a certain class of person.
Not Mrs. Rattenbury.
Oh.
Oops, sorry. You don't have to worry, Mum. I'm sure you'll manage your grapefruit perfectly.
Just stay and say hello and then leave us alone for a moment, will you? Hello, Stella. Did you come by car?
No, I sent the rolls on ahead and had Phillips pick me up off the train. It wasn't the Bell, of course, but it had a perfectly good Pullman. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Aunt Stella.
Oh, you get handsomer every time I see you. Any girls in his life yet?
Oh, yes. Happily, they all live in Hollywood.
Wouldn't nearer be better?
He's too young for girls.
Darling, I wasn't being serious. My dear, what about this murder case?
Did you ever meet her, Aunt Stella?
Mrs. Rattenbury? Oh, no. But the awful thing is, I suppose one could have. Your Uncle Henry, of course, is going around boasting that he did meet her at a cocktail party somewhere, and she sang one of her songs. But you know what a liar he is. By next week, he'll have had an affair with her.
Which wouldn't have been too difficult, I gather.
Difficult for Henry, even with Mrs. Rattenbury. I said to him, you'd better be careful, dear. You don't know what the gardener's boy and I get up to while you're up at the stock exchange. We might swing a mallet on you any time.
Do you think that they both swung together, or took it in turns?
Oh, they both swung together, of course. Like two Etonians. And we both swing together and swear by the best of one. Not schools. Pools would do. I gather from the commissioner there was a pool of blood all over the floor, inches deep. And she was dancing the black bottom in it.
No, really?
Stark naked, my dear. And trying to kiss all of the policemen. And shouting out, I did it! I bumped him all!
Will you please stop?
Mum's very shocked by it all.
Well, of course she is. Of course we all are. But with a thing as appalling as this, and in the heart of Bournemouth, too, the only thing one can do is make a joke of it. If one starts trying to think of it seriously, one would go mad. I mean, it being with a servant. To me, that's the real horror.
Tony, go to your room.
Yes, Mum. Goodbye, Aunt Stella.
To me, the real horror is the boy's age. Exactly the same age as Tony.
When he met her, perhaps. Now he's a year older. 18. Old enough to hang.
Oh, God. The law's unjust. It's the woman who should hang.
Oh, she will. No doubt of that, thank heavens. But after all, the boy did kill his employer. He really shouldn't get away with that.
I don't know. I only know she ought to be lynched.
Well, she might be. You should hear what they're saying about her in Bournemouth.
I suppose I'm being silly, but whenever I think about that horrible case, I think about Tony.
Yes, I'm afraid you are being rather silly, darling. I doubt if Tony is going to commit murder for a middle-aged nympho-dipso songwriter. There can't be many in Bournemouth.
There was a married woman in Dieppe last Christmas, well over 30, who had an eye on him. French, too.
Was Tony interested?
I didn't give him a chance to be. I changed hotels.
Yes, you would. There are worse ways for a boy to start than with a married woman who knows how to take all the right precautions, coupled with a bit of French élan.
Just a moment. Hello, Randolph.
Hello, Mrs. Davenport.
Tony's in his bedroom. You know where that is.
Yes, thank you.
That's Tony's best pal at Westminster. Randolph Brown, a bishop's son.
Well, shall we go?
There's something I want to ask you. Should I mention tonight about John and...
Well, don't mention the word divorce tonight. Leave it to me. When's the decree absolute?
Not for another couple of months.
Well, I hope it's not in the Bournemouth Echo.
Stella, after all, I am the innocent party.
My dear, in Bournemouth, nobody in a divorce is ever the innocent party.
Oh. Let them see me as a glamorous divorcee, then.
Frankly, darling, I don't think that's very likely either.
It's all clear, Tony?
Thank you. Goodbye.
Have you got to the orgy in the Royal Palace Hotel?
I wonder how many times they did it together.
From the time he went to live in the house, which was... Oh, it's here somewhere. Yes. Congress first took place a month after he was employed.
Congress?
Legal for it.
What about the Congress of Anglican Bishops? Assuming twice a night?
Why twice a night? He wasn't in training for anything.
What do you mean, you could have made it more?
Double. Easily.
Bollocks. Here it is. At twice a night until the murder is 314 times.
You know, when they open that trap door, he'll probably float upwards and not drop downwards.
I'm not being funny, Brown. I really do almost envy him.
Mind you, 314 times. Well, that's nothing in a lifetime. And for him, it will be a lifetime, poor sod. I hope to put up 1 million before I die.
Not a hope. You'll never get enough girls.
You only need one.
And when you're 80, it'll probably still be Jones Minor.
Oh, you're out of date.
Who is it now?
Shuttleworth?
I don't know him.
He's in the choir.
Oh, God, you are disgusting. Randy by name and Randy by nature.
That's right. Anyway, a chap's got to do something, hasn't he? Or else he'd go raving mad.
Oh, it's hell, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. It'll do till something better comes along.
But when will that be? God, it's frustrating. To be 17 is hell. I mean, 17 in English. And upper class. And living in this century is hell. I wonder what our parents think we do between 13 and 21.
Solo, I should think.
Which is such damn humbug. You should have heard my mother on this, Mrs. Rattenbury. The murder apart, my mother seems to think that she's the monster of Glamis just because she's 20 years older than Wood. And why not? Look at her. She's damned attractive.
Not bad at all.
314 times. My God. I've a good mind. And with Mother out. How much money have you got?
Good mind to what?
Try it. Tonight.
With Mrs. Rattenbury?
No, idiot. It.
Oh. 17 and threepence.
And I've got 10 bob. What do you suppose we could get for £1.7 and threepence?
Both of us?
Well, don't you want to?
Not for 13 and 7pence halfpenny, thank you.
Well, will you lend it to me then?
Are you serious?
Yes.
I know nothing about it.
Why? What can happen to me? She can only say no. Oh, you won't come with me?
Davenport, you're speaking to the son of a bishop. When I do it, it'll be Jermyn Street and a fiver. I think I better warn you, my dear child, it's not going to be Romeo and Juliet. Or even Wood and Mrs. Rattenbury.
Be out when Mum gets back.
I'm not staying here.
I didn't say you could sit.
Oh, sorry, dear.
If the lawyers allow you to sit, that is their business. I have to obey prison regulations.
Yes, of course. What's your name, dear?
Wardress Webster.
No, I mean your Christian name.
We're not allowed to use first names.
Phyllis did. She always called me Alma.
Who is Phyllis?
The other one, the one that's gone on leave.
Oh, Mrs. Stringer? Well, she should not have.
Oh, I expect it was quite wrong. But she was an awful dear all the same. She used to tell me about her little son. Same age as my youngest. My little John. Poor little John. Oh, well, he doesn't know yet. Christopher, that's my eldest. He does, of course. But in his letters, he's quite cheerful. Of course, he doesn't quite understand. How long do you think my trial will last?
I could not say, I'm sure.
Mr. Montague. Oh, such a dear Mr. Montague. And so good-looking, too. He says he thinks it will last 5 days. What will I be allowed to wear?
It will be your privilege to dress exactly as you please.
Could I wear pyjamas?
I would think what you are currently wearing would be more suitable.
Of course, I wasn't serious. Phyllis would have seen the joke. No, I only meant that's what they always write about. The female prisoner wearing a fetching blue ensemble. Just can't go on wearing a fetching blue ensemble 5 days running. On the 5th day, it'll stop fetching and start carrying. What made you become a wardress, dear? Did you think you were cut out for it?
We're not allowed to answer personal questions.
Aren't you? Phyllis always told me...
Mrs. Stringer may have had other ideas. I prefer to abide by the rules.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Prisoner Rattenbury, on your feet!
I am on my feet.
All right, Wardress, you may leave us.
Sir!
Morning.
Good morning.
Sit down, please, Mrs. Rattenbury.
Oh, thank you.
Mrs. Rattenbury?
Players, my favourite. Mr. Montague, you are a duck.
Is there anything else I can get you that you need?
Well, not really things that a man would know about. Kirby grips and things. Irene will see to those.
She's still coming to see you?
Oh, yes, you can't keep her away.
Mrs. Rattenbury, do you persist in saying your various statements you made to the police regarding the murder are true?
Well, I can't go back on them,
You
can
can
I?
very easily go back on them. In fact, Mrs. Rattenbury, to save your life, I'll repeat that, to save your life, you must.
Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to say the things you want me to say. I really would, but I can't.
Very well. Let me read to you some of the official statements you made to the police. Late on the night of the murder, after the body had been removed to hospital, you say to Inspector Mills, I was playing cards with my husband when he dared me to kill him as he wanted to die. I picked up a mallet. He said, you have not the guts to do it. I then hit him with the mallet. Did you say that? Mrs. Rattenbury, please pay attention.
Yes, I'm sorry, what?
Did you say that to Inspector Mills?
Yes.
Remember saying every word?
Yes.
In spite of having consumed the best part of a bottle of whiskey?
My mind was perfectly clear.
Perfectly clear. Half an hour before you signed that, you were playing the gramophone full blast, dancing about the room half-dressed and trying to kiss several of the policemen.
Oh, dear, was I really? They didn't say that at the magistrate's court?
No, because it didn't suit their case. But they'll say it at the trial because it'll suit mine.
Oh, must you? Dancing about half naked and... Oh, dear, how could I have...
This has come to you as a complete surprise.
Oh, yes.
Yet you remember clearly every word of a statement you made half an hour later when, according to the police, you'd had even more to drink. Mrs. Rattenbury.
My mind must have cleared.
And you'll say that in court.
I certainly will.
Right. Where did you find this mallet?
Lying about.
In the sitting room?
No, it couldn't have been, could it? It must have been the hall.
Did you know that Wood had borrowed it from his father earlier that evening?
No.
What did you do with the mallet afterwards?
I hid it.
Why? If you're going to confess, why did you hide it?
Because it looks so horrible.
More horrible than the body of your husband with his head caved in.
Don't.
I must. Where did you hide this mallet, Mrs. Rattenbury?
I can't remember, even now.
Why should Wood know where the mallet was hidden and not you?
He didn't know.
He did. On his arrest 2 days after yours, he described to the police exactly where he'd hidden it, in the garden, exactly there they found it, with his fingerprints all over it.
Well, they would have been, wouldn't they? He'd carried it all the way from his father's.
Why weren't your fingerprints on it?
I wore gloves.
Where did you find the gloves?
I have lots of pairs. I keep them upstairs.
Your story, then, is this. Your husband asks you to kill him. You agree. You go out into the hall to find a suitable implement. Find a gardener's mallet, borrowed that evening by Wood. You leave it there, go upstairs and choose a pair of gloves. You come downstairs, you pick up the mallet in your gloved hands. You hit your husband 3 times on the back of the head. Back of the head, Mrs. Rattenbury, not the front.
Stop
and
it.
kill him. You then hide the mallet, somewhere in the garden, but you can't remember where. Presumably you put your gloves back in a drawer in your bedroom. You then ring the police, to whom you give a full confession. Mrs. Rattenbury, if I told that story in court, the jury's laughter would drown my voice.
Well, if they don't believe it, that's that.
No, it isn't quite that, Mrs. Rattenbury. If I told that story in court, do you know what the jury would believe? They would believe that it was Wood who killed your husband, with a mallet especially acquired for that purpose, that he did so with your knowledge and consent, certainly under your influence, very probably at your urging. That will make you both equally guilty of murder. Your efforts to shield Wood will have the effect of placing a noose around his neck just as surely as around your own.
You're just trying to scare me. If I say I did it alone, how can they find him guilty?
They can, and they will. Mrs. Rattenbury, would you like to tell us the truth?
I already have. I killed rats alone, and George had nothing to do with it.
Montague, it seems there is nothing more.
Mr. O'Connor, might I?
By all means.
Mrs. Rattenbury, we've come to know each other quite well in the last few weeks, haven't we?
Oh, yes, very well.
During our talks, one of those things I found out about you is that you're a very affectionate person. I mean, for instance, you told me how much you liked that wardress.
Phyllis? Yes, she was a dear.
And Irene Riggs.
I love Irene.
Then you've told me often how fond you were of your husband.
Old rats. Yes, he was a funny old thing in his way, but I was fond of him. Very fond, really.
Mrs. Rattenbury, how can you possibly expect me to believe that you deliberately hit him with a garden mallet with such force that his blood gushed out on the carpet at the first stroke? That you shattered his skull with the second, opening up his head so that his brains were exposed. That you changed the grip on the mallet and hit him on the right side of his head, opening up a gash just over the eye from which the blood spurted half across the room and would have blinded him helplessly if he'd stayed alive. And that you coldly left him there in that chair to die suffocating in his own blood while you calmly hid the mallet in the garden and the gloves upstairs. How can you expect me to believe that you, of all people, did that to him? Above all, how can you go on loving and shielding the man who did?
Yes, that was quite good work, Montague. Wardress!
We're going.
Yes, sir.
Please try and save your life, Mrs. Rattenbury. Believe me, I think it's worth saving.
But it's all a question of timing, you see. A breakthrough of that kind is of little moment unless you follow it up at once. And that, of course, after you, my dear fellow, you are quite unable to do.
Here.
Oh, Tar.
Keep it.
Thanks, love. Thank you, Wardress Webster.
What is it?
There's nothing really. They're just trying to get me to say something and I won't, that's all.
But they usually know best.
Not in this case. In this case, I know what's best. You see, Wardress Webster.
Joan.
You see, Joan. They both seem to think just now that I didn't want to save my life. As if anyone in the world doesn't want to save their life. Me above all others. I love life. I always have. It's just the cost, you see.
Is anything the matter, Tony?
No, nothing.
Nervous? Petrified?
I heard on the wireless there's an enormous crowd already. And they're getting out mounted police for tomorrow. Fears for the female prisoner's safety, or something. I suppose you're sure you'll be in court number 1?
Yes, Fred, sir.
Have you got your speech ready?
I know what I'm going to say. I can't judge this woman fairly, and no power on earth can make me.
Are you sure you wouldn't like a coffee?
All right, yes.
It's very sweet of you to have these qualms. But if I were you, I'd go in there, play noughts and crosses for 4 or 5 days, and then vote guilty with the 11 others.
Mum, I want to see Dad.
You can't, without my permission.
I want your permission.
When?
Now. Tonight.
Certainly not.
I have to see him. I have to. It's a matter of life and death.
Oh, don't be absurd.
I meant that literally, Mum. Life and death. And what's more, whether I get your permission or not, I'm going to see him. Now, if he's in. And if he's not, I will wait until he is.
What happened?
I can't tell you.
There's nothing you can't tell me. Whatever it is, Tony, you've got to tell me.
I'd sooner die.
And I suppose you mean that literally, too.
Yes. I'm sorry, Mum, but it's something that can only be talked about between men.
When did you become a man?
Do you remember the evening that I was reading about Mrs. Rattenbury?
Yes, very clearly. It was the evening you went to the Kensington with Randolph.
Yes. Only I didn't go to the cinema. I went somewhere else, on my own. So don't blame Randy. He warned me. He didn't want me to go. I'm sorry, but that's all I can tell you.
No, it isn't. A boy should be able to tell his mother everything.
I'm not a boy any longer, Mum. I am grown up. It's a pretty horrible way to grow up, I know, but it's happened. And there it is. I went to a doctor and I know what I've got to face now.
Who is this doctor?
Anonymous. I'm anonymous too. Someone at St. George's Hospital. There's a notice up in lavatories, in tube stations, telling you where to go. I didn't have the courage until today.
You should have seen Dr. McIntyre.
And have him tell you.
You've told me.
Not the lot. Not the sordid details. Not the things that I've got to do in the bathroom twice a day. But not this bathroom. I am determined on that.
Why not this bathroom? I won't say a word about it, I promise you. If it's not serious, if it's just something you'll get over with treatment.
Mum, twice a day, for maybe 6 weeks, maybe longer, I will have to lock myself in there and you will hear the tap running. Do you honestly think that I can hope to come out of there without knowing what you're saying to yourself? My son has committed a filthy, disgusting act and he's been punished for it. With a filthy, disgusting disease and a filthy, disgusting treatment.
Well, isn't it true?
No. What I did that night was silly, if you like, but the act was as natural as breathing. And a good deal more pleasant. Good night, Mum.
Tony, don't you realise what I've got to go through tomorrow? You're not going to him now. I won't allow it.
And what will you do? Will you get out a warrant, have me tell the judge about my adventure in Paddington? I'm sorry, Mum. I'm terribly sorry. Don't wait up. If you will have me, I will stay the night.
Oh, that woman.
That's it! That's it! That's a dirty man! Wait, won't wait, the grass! Get out of my... Who do you think you are? You bastard! Call yourself a man! She's a dirty bitch! Bash him off as the one you're back on for! In the long town! That's more like it! Run, dear! Run!
Well, dear, that worked a treat, didn't it? There's no better weapon than a lady's handbag, I always say. Come on now, get out of that uniform. Your dress is here.
They were shouting, kill her.
You mustn't take any notice, dear. There's a lot of ill people in the world, far more than anyone knows.
Joan.
Yes, dear.
Why?
God knows. I've seen it often before. Never as bad as this, I grant, but... envy. That's what I think it is. Plain envy.
How could they envy me now?
Well, you at the Old Bailey, centre of attention. But now it's hate. Mob hate, which is the nastiest, illest, ugliest thing in the whole world. Mind you, I'm not the Pope.
Hatred is awful.
Forget them. It's a compliment to be hated by them. There's the dress you wanted. You are going to look a picture in court, I know it.
Ah, Caswell, you're just the man I wanted to see. Is the enemy about?
Crum Johnson, he's just left to muster his witnesses.
Quite a crowd he's got together. Was he looking cocky?
He's every reason to, hasn't
he? We'll see. How's your lad?
Wood? I haven't seen him yet.
Very a spirited disposition, I hear.
That's one word for it. I call it cheeky. Cheeky and stubborn.
Bad combination. How far are you involving us in the borrowing of the mallet?
Wood's father is going to say he assumed the boy was borrowing it with your client's knowledge and consent.
Assumption is nothing. I can tear that apart. What exactly did he tell the father he was borrowing it for?
To put up a sun shelter in the garden.
A sun shelter! In mid-March, on one of the coldest days of the year.
Was it?
Yes.
Should I have known that? Is it important?
To me.
Why?
Trade secret, dear boy. If I thought it would help you, I'd tell you, but it won't.
You look cheerful.
Well, I always look cheerful. It's half the battle. You'd better do something about yourself. Try a little rouge or something.
I didn't sleep at all last night.
Oh, that was a mistake. I had a large dinner at the Garrick, got away from the bloody actor, slept 2 hours in the smoking room. After that, home and bed. Now, look, Caswell, I don't want to bully, but any suggestion that we wielded that mallet, I shall not hesitate to remind the jury, whilst we are a poor, weak woman who couldn't drive an iron peg into soft peat in under 40 whacks, you are a hulking, great, muscular brute of an ex-builder who could easily knock a man's head off in 3.
Yes, and did.
That's right, and did. You're not disputing your statement of confession you made to the police on the day of your arrest.
How can I?
I don't know. I only know I'm disputing every one of mine. After half an hour in there with the Bournemouth Constabulary, those 7 separate confessions will be floating down past Crum Johnson's nose like confetti. I suppose while you were knocking the old man's block in, we were winding up the gramophone and cheering and egging you on.
Of course. I'm sorry, O'Connor, but it's my only chance.
Of what?
Of getting a manslaughter. I'd better warn you, I intend to push your evil moral influence and your shameless depravity as hard as I can.
Oh, push away, my dear fellow. Push away if it's all you've got. I shall push your psychopathological rages, your surliness and your fits of sudden violence. You won't mind that, I hope.
The reverse. It might help me to a guilty but insane.
Under Humphreys? You've not a hope. He sleeps with the McNaughton rules under his pillow. Did the murderer know what he was doing at the time that he did it? If he did he know that what he was doing was wrong? I'd say your boy had a teeny inkling of both.
Do you always wear slippers in court?
Always. Because they make us as uncomfortable as they can up here. No reason why we shouldn't be cosy down here. Anyway, aren't you supposed to have committed the murder under the influence of a lorry load of cocaine?
Yes, damn it. He would choose the one drug that heightens the perceptions rather than dulling them.
Change your drug.
I can't. Cocaine is what I'm instructed to take. And as a Poor Person's Defence Act lawyer, I've got to obey my instructions.
Oh, my dear fellow, we all have to obey our instructions. Some of us sometimes manage to get them just a little bit confused.
Not a chance here. He won't budge an inch.
Where did you get the cocaine from?
Someone, somewhere in London. We can't remember who or where.
Good God. You're stuck with his whole confession.
No way round it.
Hangover?
No. Nerves. Does one ever get over them?
Never. They get worse with age.
I've never seen you look even remotely nervous.
Oh, well, that's something we do learn. Never to show it. But that carafe I always have in front of me. You don't think that's plain water, do you?
Gin.
Vodka. Safe as houses, not a whiff from a foot away. Is this your first capital charge?
No, but with the others I had some chance.
Oh, my dear boy. Well, there's life, there's hope.
Our hope, their lives.
Do you think there's a single moment I'm unconscious of that?
No. Well, I'd better have one last shot at getting to change his drug into something else.
Yes, good luck. Look, Caswell, if there's the faintest suggestion he got any drugs from her, I shall be down on you like a tiger. That poor bitch has got enough to carry into court without dope peddling. Get him to come off drugs altogether. Use our shameless depravity, pernicious influence. It's much safer. I can't take back. That's my honest advice to you, old man.
Well, it would be a very foolish advocate who neglected advice from such a source.
Oh,
thank you.
You're very welcome.
Unless such a source happened to be fighting the same trial with him.
As an ally, my dear fellow.
An ally who wouldn't hesitate to slash my throat if he thought he could help his client.
Slash your throat? My dear Caswell, I give you an open invitation to attack me in my weakest spot, to wit, my deplorable moral character. How can that possibly be slashing your throat?
Sir?
Montague, good. Have you got our friend in, all right?
Morning, Mr. Caswell. Did you hear that crowd cheering me when I arrived?
Mr. Wood, we have only a few minutes before you go on trial for your life. Are you still determined to instruct me that you murdered Rattenbury when under the influence of cocaine?
Perce Wood, the odd job boy. It's come a long way instructing a man dressed up like you. Well, I instruct you, Mr. Caswell. I done the old man in when I was crazed from cocaine and not responsible for my actions. And that's what I'm going to tell him.
You won't have the opportunity. I'm not putting you in the witness box.
How can you stop me?
By not calling you.
Or why not? You've got to.
I am not putting you into the witness box because I would not like to hear you explaining to Mr. Crum Johnson, one of the most devastating cross-examiners at the bar, exactly how you became a dope fiend.
But that's my defence.
What does cocaine look like? Mr. Wood. I mean, what colour is it?
Colour? It's brown.
Brown?
With black specks.
With black specks, and if you went into the witness box, you would tell Mr. Crum Johnson that.
Of course.
And if he asked you why, in popular parlance, it was called snow, how would you answer him?
I don't know, I didn't know it was.
It is called snow because it is white, Mr. Wood. The purest possible white.
Jesus.
Exactly.
But without cocaine, where's my defence?
I've told you. Many times.
No.
You are of age to be hanged, Mr. Wood.
I know.
You were disposed then to die.
Oh, no. I'm not. I want to live. Christ, don't I want to live. But I'm not going to say that she made me do it. I mean, they can tear me apart before they get me to say that.
I don't think you quite understand
No, it's you who don't bloody understand. Alma Rattenbury, sex-mad, drunken bloody cow that she is. Lying, deceitful bitch to come to that. She's the only woman I've ever had. The only woman I've ever loved. And I ain't gonna shop her now. No, it's you who don't bloody understand, Mr. Caswell. Nor the others either.
Very likely. I'll see you in court.
Not long now, dear. I said you'd look a treat.
Wardress, leave us, please.
Sir.
I hope they didn't upset you too much outside.
Well, it came as rather a shock.
Mrs. Rattenbury, it is my duty to tell you that there will be deep prejudice against you up there.
Oh, yes, I know.
You must be prepared to answer some very venomous questions.
Oh, but I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm not going into the witness box. I told you that, Mr. Montague.
Montague, would you?
Of course.
I beg you, most earnestly, to reconsider, madam.
I'm sorry, but I can't. I will not go into the witness box. Not under oath, not giving George away.
Because you want him to see you as a tragic heroine. Do you love him as much as that?
Me, a heroine to George. That's funny. To him, I'm just a drunken, sexy, lying bitch. He's told me so a million times.
Then why, in heaven's name, sacrifice yourself for him?
Because it's right. I'm responsible, and neither you nor anyone...
Hello, Mummy.
What kind of a man are you?
A humane man, Mrs. Rattenbury. I thought you might like a couple of minutes with your boy before you go into court. We'll leave you alone.
Oh. How are you, Chris?
All right.
They brought you up from school?
I wanted to come.
They didn't bring you through those crowds?
Oh, yes. But nobody knew who I was. They were nasty people, though.
Did you hear them shouting?
Oh, I didn't listen, Mummy.
And how's little John?
Oh, all right. He gets a bit tearful sometimes.
They haven't told him.
Oh, no.
He misses me.
Misses you?
Well, Chris, what have you been told to say to me?
Told to say to you?
By Mr. O'Connor.
Nothing.
Really? Nothing?
Well, The obvious thing, of course.
And what's that?
About you not giving George away in court. It was a bit of a shock, because he says the jury may find you guilty. But he put it so nicely, though.
How did he put it?
Well, he said that, as a schoolboy, I'd understand about not sneaking on a friend. Well, of course I understand. Except in this kind of thing. I mean, in a case of murder. Real murder. What they might do, except... Of course, they'd never do that to you. Oh, Mummy. Oh, shh. Damn it. I promised I wouldn't.
What else did Mr. O'Connor put so nicely?
He said that, as I was almost grown up, I should understand that when a woman has a choice between her lover and her children, she's almost bound to put her lover first.
The judge has sent us a signal. You should be getting to your seat, young man. And Mr. Watson is sitting outside. He will be sitting with you.
Christopher's not going to be in court.
Of course.
Every day?
That depends. Say au revoir to your mother, old chap.
Goodbye, Mummy. Good luck.
Don't think you've won, Mr. O'Connor.
Oh, I never think that about any case. Until the end.
Mrs. Davenport, I understand from the jury bailiff that you wish to be excused from jury service on the grounds of conscience.
Yes. From this particular jury on this particular case. I will serve on any other.
You have a conscientious objection to capital punishment?
No, my lord.
Where, then, does your conscience enter the matter?
My lord, I have a deep prejudice against that woman.
The female prisoner?
Yes.
Would the female prisoner please rise? Do you know this woman personally?
No. But it's as if I did.
I don't follow, I'm afraid.
I've read about her in the newspapers.
Is that all?
My lord, you're here to see that this woman gets a fair trial. Isn't that so?
It is, madam. It is also my duty, as it will be yours, to put out of my head all of the deplorably wide publicity this case has attracted and allow the facts
I'm
of the
sorry,
case
my lord,
to
I
determine...
know these arguments. You see, I know about the law. My father was a judge in India.
Mrs.
I warn you now, and I warn these gentlemen who are defending her, that no matter what oath I am forced to take, I will not be able to try this woman's case without deep prejudice. My mind is set against her.
Mr. O'Connor, you have heard my view. It remains unaltered. However, you might have cause for a challenge propter effectum. If you have, I'm very willing to hear it.
If your lordship permits.
I do.
She's an asset.
On the question of bias.
Exactly. You can refer to her in your final address.
My lord, we will not challenge.
No challenge, my lord. The prejudice does not appear to be directed against my client.
Obviously, Mr. Croom Johnson, you won't wish to challenge, but do you think I am right?
I feel your lordship's view of the matter is both wise and just.
Mrs. Davenport, we all find that there are no grounds for your self-disqualification. Will you then take the oath?
Take the book in your right hand and read what is on this card.
I do solemnly swear by Almighty God that I will well and truly try the issues joined between our sovereign lord the king and the prisoner at the bar, and will give a true verdict according to the evidence.
Congratulations on your opening, Crum Johnson.
No, thank you. Caswell, thank you. Admirably fair, I thought. I'm glad.
Fair? If that bloody Crum Johnson uses the phrase woman and boy once more, I'm going to have him disbarred and demand a retrial.
Why don't you tell him?
Let him know he's scored. I'll have woman and child next, and then good opening, Crum Johnson.
Thank you. It was fair, I think.
Every bit as fair as we've come to expect of you.
How kind. Extraordinary incident that was, that woman juror saying she was prejudiced against your client. Very distressing to hear that sort of thing, you know. I wonder you didn't challenge.
Yes, I suppose I should have done.
You won't, of course, be able to make any reference to her in your final address.
Oh, no, that would be deeply improper.
Well, I honestly think my opening helped remove some of her prejudices.
Yes.
I emphasise that this was in no way a court of morals, and that they were to direct their attention only to the facts of the case.
Brought against this woman and this boy.
Ah, I did notice your uneasiness at the appellation boy. But what else, in all honesty, could I call him, O'Connor? The jury only have to look at the document.
And see a hulking young man old enough to be hanged, and a woman young-looking enough to pass herself off successfully as his sister.
But the gap in ages is so much a part of the case. One must steel oneself, must one not, to face facts? However disagreeable.
Bloody man. Do you know I drew him in the bar golf tournament, and he wouldn't give me a 14-inch putt? I missed it, too. I'm going to beat that bugger if it's the last thing I do.
Has Tony come home?
Tony? No.
Oh, God, I won't let John take him away from me. I won't.
Darling, you've had a tiring day. Do you want a cup of tea?
No, but I'd love a drink. A whiskey.
That's bold of you. So, it didn't work this morning?
No. And what's worse, the jury has elected me forewoman because I let out that father was a judge.
That is too splendid. So, what do you have in court tomorrow?
The rest of the prosecution witnesses, I think. Oh, Stella, it's all so foul. I'm going to change.
Darling, do you know what odds the bookmakers are laying on Mrs. Rattenbury being convicted?
Odds? How can they be so unfeeling?
No principled bookmakers. In the city, they're even taking bets on whether she'll hang. Good odds, too. But for her being convicted, I saw it in the paper, they're giving 3 to 1.
Only 3 to 1? That woman? It's absurd.
Well, if ever I heard a tip, straight from the horse's mouth. Hello? You're still at the office? Oh, there's a good Henry. Yeah, look, darling, apparently you can get 3 to 1 on Mrs. Rattenbury being convicted. Well, Edie's just back from court, and she says that in her view those odds are madly generous. Yes, and they've made her forewoman, too, so of course she'll have a big say. Yes, a real hot snip. Well, put on 600 for me, would you? Oh, thank you, darling. Yeah, I will. Henry sends his love. Tony!
Hello, Aunt Stella.
Tony.
Hello, Mum.
Tony, thank God. You've come back.
No, I haven't. Dad's here.
I won't see him. I'm not allowed to see you. The judge said...
I remember very well what the judge said. No communication of any kind. Hello, Stella.
Hello, John.
So, this letter I've brought is just as wrong as my presence.
I won't read it.
I thought not, which is why I'm delivering it myself.
I'll go. No, don't. Please.
I don't mind Stella hearing what I've got to say. Tony, go down and wait in the car, would you?
You take him away.
To the cottage?
And I forbid him to go.
Go ahead, Tony.
No.
I'm sorry, Mum. Really. I'll call you tomorrow.
I've only joined the police.
Yes. Then I'd have to give my exact reasons to the judge for taking my son away from here. Of course, he'd find the reasons quite insufficient, and I'd be fined or committed, and Tony would be returned to you. There'd probably be a little something in the papers, which would probably be read by Tony's headmaster.
This is pure blackmail.
Yes, I suppose it is. It's also a truthful forecast of what would happen, must happen, if you invoke the law.
Exactly what lies have you told his headmaster?
I told him the truth. Not all of it. I said the boy had had a severe psychological shock, that he'd attempted suicide.
That's a lie.
It's not. The night before last, he swallowed some sleeping pills. No. If you don't believe me, go into the bathroom and look for your sleeping pills. Luckily, there were only 7 or 8 left, and they made him sick at once.
But I'd have heard him.
Tony's a polite boy. He can even vomit quietly enough not to wake his mother. And then, apparently, lie on the bathroom floor sobbing, but into a towel, quietly.
But is this thing he has as dreadful as that?
Medically, it's nothing, provided it's treated promptly. It's the psychological shock he won't get over so easily. And he'll never get over it here. Unless... Are you going to read my letter?
Never.
Then I'll read it to you. My dearest Edie, for the sake of Tony, and also for our own sakes, I want you to rescind the decree nisi. It's very easily done by application to a judge in chambers. I must tell you with complete truth that there is no other woman in my life. No single other woman, that is. The one you know about left me some months ago with no regrets on either side. She wasn't important to me. No woman has ever been important to me, except yourself. I admit that I've had occasional affairs, but they were necessary to me. You know why. Always brief, and usually with a mercenary tinge. Without you, Edie, and without Tony, I have been a very lonely man. So I believe, are you lonely without me? Please, let me come back into your life. If you do, I promise to behave as well as I can. That doesn't, I'm afraid, mean as well as you'd want me to. It can never mean that, Edie, my darling, as you know. But I swear a solemn oath to you that you will never otherwise be humiliated. I renounce my conjugal rights entirely, but I earnestly entreat you to let me once again be your loving husband. John.
Your terms.
Yours as well.
The answer is no.
Think about it, Edie. For God's sake, think about it.
Stella, how can you? He wants me to condone adultery. It's unthinkable, and you know it. I will not break the standards by which I have lived all my life.
Your standards could be wrong, you know. They're certainly a little dated. You won't reconsider? Then I'll say goodbye. Tell me, this Mrs. Rattenbury, is she for it?
We're not allowed to talk about it.
I don't give much for her chances, with you judging her. I don't know anything about Mrs. Rattenbury except what I've read in the papers. But that's enough to tell me that her vices, which I'm sure are deplorable, at least add up to some kind of affirmation. Your virtues, Edie, which I know are admirable, add up to precisely nothing. Goodbye.
Sergeant, at what time did you receive this call from the hospital? You may use your notebook, if there is no objection.
The call came through at 2:13 a.m., sir, saying that all attempts to revive the deceased had failed.
What did you do then?
Acting on this information, I duly presented myself at the Villa Madeira at 2:47 a.m. There was a lot of commotion proceeding from inside.
What kind of commotion?
There was a gramophone playing at full blast, sir, and some female laughter of a shrill nature. There being no answer to the bell, I tried the door and found it open. I then entered the sitting room and found the female prisoner attired in her nightdress and 2 police officers, to whom she was making flourishing gestures with her bed jacket in imitation of bullfighting or some such. I immediately summoned the 2 officers outside and asked what their business had been and sent them away. I then proceeded back into the house.
Damn and blast! Where have you gone? Come back. We're having fun.
Beg pardon for the intrusion, but would you be...
Oh, another lovely policeman. Come in, come in. We're having a gorgeous
Would
time.
you be Mrs. Frances Rattenbury?
Alma to you, dear. Come and dance.
May we have the music down, please?
Why? How can we dance with no music?
Excuse me, madam, with your permission.
Why did you do that? Now it's quiet. I don't like it quiet.
I'm sorry, madam, but you could be disturbing the neighbours.
Oh, that's terrible. Disturbing the neighbours is terrible.
I must ask again if you are Mrs. Frances Rattenbury.
That's right.
The widow of Frances Rattenbury.
Widow?
You've not been informed of your husband's death?
Don't say such awful things.
Let's have some music.
I must ask you, madam, what you know about your husband's death.
Everything. I know everything.
I did it, you see. All by myself. All alone. All alone. I'm so all alone.
Who else is in this house?
There's only Irene.
Irene.
She's my maid. My friend. I sent her up to bed. She knows nothing about it.
And this Irene is the only other person in the house?
There's George, too.
George?
My chauffeur. He's nothing. He's just a boy. He's just an odd job boy.
And where is he?
Well, how would I know? I'm not his mother. Upstairs, I expect, to sleep. He's very young, you see.
Madam, I must now caution you. You're not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you do say will be taken down and may be given in evidence. Do you follow me?
Anywhere. Are you married? You've a lot of girls, I expect. Would you like £10? Oh, no. It's a crime to give a policeman money.
Madam, please.
He wanted to die, you see. He said he'd lived too long. He gave me a mallet and he dared me to kill him, so I did.
Where is the mallet?
What?
The mallet.
Oh,
Where is the mallet?
I'll remember in the morning. No. I mustn't sleep. I might dream.
Let's have some music again.
Madam, I propose to telephone the police station using the call box outside.
Oh, there's one over there. Better still, there's one in the bedroom.
I shall use the call box. Thank you, madam.
Please yourself, but you don't know what you're missing.
A general question, Sergeant, about Mrs. Rattenbury's behaviour. Remembering that only a few hours before her husband had been brutally killed, how did you react in your mind to her attitude that night?
I was disgusted, sir.
In one word, how would you describe her behaviour?
Callous. Damn right brutal.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Look at the press scampering out. Imagine the headlines. They should have waited.
Sergeant, how long have you been in the police force? 20 years, sir. In that time, you would, of course, have attended many gruesome occasions, car accidents and the like? Yes, sir, many. You must then be familiar with the medical phenomenon known as shock. I've seen cases of shock. Severe shock? Some severe. How do such persons usually behave? Well, I'd say sometimes they're not quite all there. Oh, not quite all there? Not aware of their surroundings? Or excited and over-talkative? Both, sir. Why then were you so disgusted at Mrs. Rattenbury's behaviour that night?
I didn't think it was shock, sir. I mean, I saw no occasion.
You saw no occasion? Can you imagine a greater occasion for shock than the brutal murder of a dearly loved husband in her own home? What is the treatment for shock? Come on, you've read the manual. What does it say?
One should keep the victim warm using blankets when obtainable.
This victim was half-dressed on a night in March. Do you remember what the temperature was that night in Bournemouth?
No, sir, not exactly.
Would it surprise you to learn that at 2 a.m. on the morning of March the 25th, the temperature on the town hall roof was recorded at 3 degrees below freezing?
I remember it was a bit chilly, sir. I didn't know it was as cold as that.
It was as cold as that, and the windows to the sitting room were open?
Yes, sir.
Back to the manual. If the victim is not kept warm, what does it say can happen to the victim? What is there a danger of?
Collapse, sir.
What happened to Mrs. Rattenbury later that night?
She did collapse, sir, and had to be put to bed. But that was the whiskey.
Oh, was it indeed? And how much whiskey had Mrs. Rattenbury had to drink that night?
Well, I don't know exactly, sir. She was drinking from the bottle, sir, and emptied it.
In front of you, Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
You're allowed that.
I had no option, sir.
No option? What does your handbook tell you to prevent the victim taking at all costs?
Alcohol, sir.
Why? Do you remember why, Sergeant?
Because the effect of alcohol on a shock system will greatly increase the symptoms and will, in all respects, prove strongly deleterious.
And? Doesn't it add, sometimes fatal?
Yes, sir.
It may be that you are lucky that in this case it was not. Otherwise, you could be facing a very grave charge, Sergeant. Gross negligence whilst on duty. That is all.
Sergeant, has a person in a state of shock ever made sexual advances to you?
Certainly not, sir.
Or attempted to bribe you?
No, sir.
Thank you, Sergeant. That concludes the case for the Crown, my lord.
Mr. O'Connor, are you ready?
Yes, my lord. May it please your lordship? Members of the jury, it is my intention to call one witness, and one witness only, namely Mrs. Rattenbury, and I therefore claim the right of the last word.
My lord, this sudden maneuver of my friend puts me at a grave disadvantage.
My lord, I have to confess, I do not know, even at this very second as I stand here, ready to begin Mrs. Rattenbury's defence, if she will in fact obey my call to the box or not. If she does not, then it is I who will be at a grave disadvantage.
My lord, I think an adjournment at this juncture would be right.
It would be most damnably wrong. My lord, I am not exaggerating when I say in this moment lies the hinge of the entire trial. Any delay, even half an hour, it might be fatal to the cause of justice. In my view, it is vital my client goes into the box to give evidence on her own behalf, as is her right. And I have told her duty to do. I believe and pray, if called upon now, she will go. With your lordship's permission?
Yes.
I therefore call Alma Rattenbury.
Take the book in your right hand and repeat the following words after me. I swear by Almighty God...
I swear by Almighty God...
that the evidence I shall give to the court...
that the evidence I shall give to the court...
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Alma Victoria Rattenbury.
I am.
Mrs. Rattenbury, how long were you married to your husband?
8 years.
By him, did you have a child?
Yes, little John.
Mrs. Rattenbury, I can't hear you. Speak up, please. And please make sure the jury can hear what you say.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Rattenbury, little John, how old is he?
6. 6.
You have been married twice before, I think.
Yes.
By the second husband, you had a child, did you not?
Yes, Christopher.
You're fond of him, I think.
Yes.
Very fond.
Very fond.
Mrs. Rattenbury, I want you to tell me about your relationship with your husband since the birth of little John.
No, I'm sorry,
Mrs.
I'm sorry.
Rattenbury?
Is something wrong, Mr. O'Connor?
I'm sorry, my lord. An oversight on my part, if your lordship permits. Get the boy out of court, will you? I do apologize, my lord. Mrs. Rattenbury, would you say your married life was happy? Mrs. Rattenbury?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Would you say your married life was happy?
Well, it was a bit, you know.
You had some quarrels.
Not many, only little ones. Always about money. He was a bit, well, stingy. I often had to tell little fibs to get the bills paid.
Yes. We'll come back to that. Mrs. Rattenbury, I want you to tell me now about your relationship with your late husband, and be quite frank. Please? Since the birth of little John, that's 6 years ago, did you and Mr. Rattenbury live together as husband and wife?
No.
Mrs. Rattenbury, I must ask you to speak much louder, please. And please address your replies so the jury may hear them.
I'm sorry, my lord.
Since that time, you did not live together as husband and wife at all?
No.
Mrs. Rattenbury, you do understand what was meant by the question?
Yes.
Did your husband have a separate room?
Yes.
Was that at his suggestion or yours?
Oh, his.
You ought to have been ready to continue marital relationships with him.
Yes, of course.
You didn't want it.
Well, I think it was rather a question of the flesh being willing, but the spirit being weak.
It's the other way round, I think.
Oh, I expect so.
Now, between the months of November 1934 and March 1935, were you having regular sexual intercourse with Wood?
Yes.
What attitude did your husband take to all of this?
None whatsoever.
You mean he didn't know of it?
Oh, I think he must have known of it, my lord.
Then he must have taken some attitude, even if it was one of tactful silence.
I just don't think he gave it a thought.
Now, Mrs. Rattenbury, I'm going to take you through the events of the week that led up to your husband's murder. And I want you to answer my questions with complete truth. You will do that, will you not?
Mrs. Rattenbury, you are under oath. You must reply fully and truthfully to counsel's questions.
On Monday, March the 18th, that's 6 days before the murder, did you ask your husband for some money? Mrs. Rattenbury.
One moment, please. Mrs. Rattenbury, you do understand, do you not, that having taken the oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, you are in law and duty bound to do so. Do you understand that?
Yes, my lord.
Then be so good as to answer counsel's question.
For how much money did you ask?
£250.
And what little fib, to quote your own words, did you have to tell him?
That I was going up to London to have an operation.
And the following day you went up to London?
Yes.
And you stayed with Wood at an hotel in Kensington?
Yes, the Royal Palace.
During that time, did you give Wood some presents?
Yes, a pair of silk pyjamas, a new suit, and a ring for him to give me.
Now, it has been strongly suggested that there was some very sinister significance in this hotel visit just a few days before the murder. It has, in fact, been represented as some kind of premature honeymoon. What truth is there in that?
Oh, none at all. It wasn't the first time we'd been to a hotel, and he did love it so. He loved being waited on and called sir.
And you wanted to give him that pleasure?
Yes.
That was the reason for the presents?
Yes.
And the ring to yourself?
Oh, the ring was only a pretense.
A pretense? Of what?
Well, like an engaged couple.
So, this visit was no more than a whim designed to give Wood pleasure?
Yes.
What about you? Did it give you pleasure?
No, it was terrible.
In what way, terrible?
Oh, rows.
Serious rows?
Not on the surface, but underneath, of course, they were. You see, he knew I was trying to finish it.
Finish the relationship?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it had got out of hand.
Had you told him that?
I tried to many times, but the difference in our ages made it so difficult. After we got back from London, I was determined to say finish for good and mean it. I think he knew that, which was why he was making my life hell. Sorry, my lord. Dreadful.
Hell will do. Now, I'm not sure that I followed this. You say you tried to break the affair with Wood, but were unable to. One of the reasons being the difference in your ages. Surely that very thing would make it easier.
No, my lord, I'm sorry, but it makes it harder.
But surely the older party must be the dominant party.
Excuse me, my lord, but to me it's the other way round. At least it was with me and George. I think it must be with many people. Of course, I don't know.
Mrs. Rattenbury, we now come to your return to the Villa Madeira. That's 2 nights before the murder. Did your husband have any awkward question for you when you saw him?
No, it was as if I'd never been gone.
But surely he must have asked you about your operation.
No, my lord.
Anyway, all was normal at the villa.
Oh, yes, very friendly.
How was Wood?
He was a bit sulky. He wanted to stay on at the hotel, you see, but he perked up later.
You had intercourse that night?
Oh, yes, everything normal, as you said.
Thank you. Now we come to Sunday, the day of the murder.
No, I'm sorry.
No, one moment,
I'm
Mrs.
sorry,
Rattenbury, please. Please. My lord, in view of the obvious difficulties which I see your lordship has noted, I would crave your indulgence at this point to embark upon a somewhat unusual course. With your lordship's permission, I would like to quote certain passages from the signed statement entered by the prosecution yesterday and made by the prisoner Wood on the day of his arrest. That's Exhibit 27, my lord.
But that is evidence against Wood. You are asking to use it on Mrs. Rattenbury's behalf.
Well, naturally, my lord, I would hardly use it against her.
My lord, I most strenuously object to any part of the statement being read on behalf of Rattenbury. What cannot in law be used against her must not in law be used for her. My learned friend should know that very well.
I really do not need lessons in law from prosecuting counsel. I do know that it is my duty to my client to use any evidence on her behalf this court will allow. Any evidence of any sort from any source.
My lord, there are no precedents.
Yes, Mr. Crum Johnson, it is plainly a matter for me. You are perfectly correct in saying that this proposed course is highly irregular. But having regard for the undoubted fact that the law always allows, and must allow, the greatest possible latitude to the defence in a capital charge, I will decide in favour of Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, my lord.
Dangerous precedents.
I refer your lordship to paragraph 3, in which Wood is describing the events of the murder, he says. They were up in her bedroom. Oh, that's Mr. and Mrs. Rattenbury, my lord.
I have it. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor.
When I went up with the tea, the door was locked. So I listened outside. And then I heard them. Kissing noises and darling. And then I heard them doing it. I listened to them right through. And then I heard them talking and getting off the bed. So I went to my room and waited for them to come out.
Gently does it, rats. That's right. So I'll tell the Jenks we'll be over tomorrow, shall I?
If they'll have us.
Of course they'll have us. They're always asking us to stay. How long should I say? Couple of days?
It's a long way to go for a couple of days. Lot of petrol. Make it a week.
All right, dear.
Alma, I want to see ya.
Well, come down here.
Up here! Now!
You shouldn't let him talk to you like that. Alma.
He's in one of his moods. I'll be back in a jiffy.
Why was that door locked?
Locked, was it?
You lying bitch!
Oh, George, you can't think that me and Rat...
Yeah, you tidied up the bed now, haven't you? You were at it with him just now, weren't you? I heard!
George, you are a scream. Rats, of all people, I'll die laughing. George, if you ever do that again...
You'll what?
I'll tell you to get out of this house and never come back.
I could kill you quite easily.
Yes, I expect you could, dear. But not with Christopher's water pistol. George, are you all right?
Why was that door locked?
Shh, quiet, dear. Even rats could have heard that. The door was locked because it rattles when the windows open, which you should very well know, silly boy.
Are you going to these people tomorrow?
Yes.
With me driving?
Of course.
I see. Where will I sleep?
Well, they've lots of room.
In the servants' attic?
Perhaps, but I'll try to see that it's a nice one.
And eat in the servants' hall?
Oh, George, it's only for a week.
Well, you and Rex share a nice big double bed.
Stop this nonsense. Stop it at once. Do you hear?
Yes, Ma'am. Very good, Ma'am. Beg pardon, I'm sure, Ma'am.
Could you give me Bridport 3-1, please? This is Bournemouth 309. Oh.
Listen, you cow. You're to go down there now and tell me not to go to the Jenks tomorrow.
George, you're going to make me
Because
very
if
angry.
you do, I'm going to do something very bad. Something very, very bad.
Put acid in that water pistol, squirt it in my face. Hello? Go on down to the kitchen and help Irene with supper. There's a good boy. Oh, hello. Is that Mrs. Jenks?
Alma Rattenbury. Well, Rats and I were wondering if we could take you at your word and come over for a few days. Go on, ducky.
I'm warning you, Alma. Something really bad.
Well, we thought tomorrow if you could have us. Oh, that is nice. We'll drive over. Yes, I'm a chauffeur now, you know. Lovely. See you soon. Goodbye.
Wood's statement continues. I went to my dad's and borrowed the mallet. Then I went back. I could see them through the French windows, playing cribbage. Then she went up to bed. So I went into the room and hit him 3 times on the back of the head with the mallet. I then went into the garden and hid the mallet. Then I went up to bed.
George?
Yeah?
Where have you been all evening?
Out.
What are you doing?
Getting undressed.
You want to come in? Well, that's no way to treat 3 guinea pyjamas, my lad.
I'm in trouble, Alma. Real trouble.
Real trouble? There's no such thing. That's what I always say. This is a lovely world we're in, and we're meant to enjoy it. Oh, come on, look at me.
I can't.
Well, at least tell me what it is.
I can't. It's Rats.
What about him?
I've hurt him.
You had a fight?
Not a fight. I wish it had been a fight.
Have you hurt him badly?
Yeah. Very badly.
Was that him?
Well, it must have been. I thought I killed him.
What have you done to him? I'm coming, Rats. I'm coming, darling.
Don't go down.
But I must. If you've hurt him, I must help him.
I've done for him, Alma. You won't get him back.
I'm coming, Rats. I'm coming.
What is it? What's the matter?
It's Rats, Irene. Somebody's hurt him.
Oh!
Oh!
Dr. O'Donnell, run out and get Dr. O'Donnell. Quick, Irene, quick. Tell him Rats maybe die.
No!
Rats. Help's coming soon. Stay alive, please, please, please. Stay alive. Ratsy, can you hear me?
It's no use, Alma. I told you upstairs I've done for him, and I have.
Oh, no, it isn't dead. It can't be. Rats.
Take this.
Why did you do this? Why?
I had to. He was stealing you away from me.
Oh, God, you little idiot. He wasn't stealing me. He couldn't have. Oh, look. Oh, my God.
I told you upstairs I was going to do something really bad.
To me? I thought you meant to me. Why didn't you kill me? Go upstairs. Go up to your room. Don't come down here unless you're sent for. And then nothing about it. Nothing at all. Do you understand? Go upstairs.
What will you tell them?
I'll think something up.
I'll think something up. I'll think something up. What she thought up was the ludicrous, mad story she told the police. Is this the story of a sane, calm, balanced woman? Or is it not the story, thought up in panic, by a woman in a deep state of shock, aggravated by repeated doses of whiskey, and desperate at all costs to save the life of her lover?
You're addressing the jury, my lord. Really, I must object. Counsel is addressing the jury.
Yes, I quite agree. Mr. O'Connor, that was highly improper. The time for your address to the jury is not yet, as you very well know. That was really highly improper.
I do apologize, my lord. You are, of course, quite right. I was momentarily carried away. I apologize to my learned friend. And to you, my lord.
Have you finished with Wood's statement?
Yes, my lord.
And you propose to continue your examination on more conventional lines?
Indeed, my lord.
Then first, I must address a few remarks to the jury and try to make certain important points clear. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I trust you understand that what you have just heard read to you is a statement made by the prisoner Wood and cannot be used in any way at all as evidence against prisoner Rattenbury. If you have heard anything that you consider prejudicial to Mrs. Rattenbury, you must put it completely out of your minds. Now, I trust that is clear. Very well. Mr. O'Connor, you may proceed.
Thank you, my lord. Mrs. Rattenbury, I'm going to ask you a very important question. Is there any part of that statement of Wood's that is in any way inaccurate or untrue?
Mrs. Rattenbury, you must answer the question.
Is there? Is any part of that statement inaccurate or untrue in any way?
No.
None whatever?
No.
And what you thought up was the ludicrous, mad story you told the police.
Is that a question?
It is a question. Mrs. Rattenbury, have you ever in your life suffered a greater shock to your mind, body and spirit than you suffered that night when you found your husband battered to death by your lover?
My lord!
Presumably by your lover.
Nothing ever in all my life.
These stories of your dancing semi-naked, making advances to policemen, playing the gramophone full blast, did they or did they not come to you as a complete surprise when you heard about them as late as 3 weeks ago?
They did.
And what was your overriding emotion on hearing about them?
Shame. Deep, deep shame.
Mrs. Rattenbury, 3 more questions. Did you murder your husband?
No.
Did you take any part whatever in planning his murder?
No.
Did you in fact know a thing about it until Wood told you in bed upstairs that he had done it?
If I'd known, I'd have prevented it.
Thank you. Thank you. That is all.
Just a moment, Mrs. Rattenbury. You're not finished yet. I have some questions for you. In fact, a great many questions. Mrs. Rattenbury, just how old was Wood when you first invited him into the Villa Madeira as your lover?
I didn't invite him, not the way you mean. He insisted on living in.
Insisted?
Why not?
But surely you could have resisted him easily. A boy of 17.
Not easily at all. Ever since this case began, all I've heard is how I must have dominated this boy. Well, all I can say is if anyone dominated anyone else, it was George who dominated me.
Very interesting, but let us please stick with the facts. You have admitted, have you not, cheating your husband out of a considerable sum in order to take your lover up to London? Was that done under Wood's domination?
It was his idea.
And the Royal Palace, his choice of hotel?
No, that was mine.
And whose idea was it, buying the engagement ring?
It wasn't an engagement ring.
Well, whatever it was, who suggested buying it?
I did.
Indeed. Now let us return once more to the evening of the murder. This purported conversation, this alleged confession of Wood's took place in your room.
Yes.
I understood these sexual meetings usually occurred in Wood's room.
Well, that was because of little John sleeping in mine.
That night, then, little John was somewhere else?
No, he was in my room.
Little John was in your room?
Yes, but sound asleep.
Your lover would climb into bed with you, with your little son, in the same room?
Yes, but he was sound asleep.
Used this to happen often?
Well, it had to sometimes when Christopher was at home.
Your lover would clamber into bed with you and you would indulge in sexual congress with your 6-year-old child in the same room?
Yes, but he's a very sound sleeper.
A child of no more than 6 summers?
My lord, I fail to see how any of this is pertinent. Unless, of course, my learned friend intends to call little John as a witness in rebuttal of his mother's testimony.
I find that remark in the most appalling taste.
I find these constant references to little John's presence in that room. A child of no more than 6 summers. Autumns, winters, and springs come to that. I find these slurs on my client's moral character not only in appalling taste, but unfair, immoral, and entirely irrelevant. Who killed Francis Mawson Rattenbury? Isn't that what this court has been convened to find out? It's surely not whether an act or several acts of sexual congress took place in the distant presence of a heavily dormant child.
I trust my learned friend will have breath for his final address.
You need have no fear of that.
Gentlemen, please. This is becoming more of a cockpit than a court of law. I think Mr. O'Connor is right, Mr. Croom-Johnson. You have asked the witness a question, a perfectly relevant one in my view, and she has answered it. Pray let the matter rest there.
As your lordship pleases. Now, I want to be absolutely fair to you, Mrs. Rattenbury.
Fair?
When Wood, in bed with you, with your little boy in the corner...
My lord!
I've not asked my question yet.
Please ask it, Mr. Croom-Johnson.
When Wood told you that he had battered your husband with a mallet, did you believe him?
Not at first, no.
When you went downstairs and found that your husband had indeed been hit on the head, did you believe him then?
Well, one naturally would, wouldn't one?
You're here to answer my questions, not to ask them of me, madam.
I see. Well, yes, I did believe it then.
It is my duty to submit to you that you knew he had done it because you had encouraged him to do it. Well,
I'm sorry, is that a question?
it is a question, Mrs. Rattenbury, and a very important one.
I thought I'd answered it, but if you want it again... I did not plot my husband's death. It came as a great shock to me. I have never in all my life harmed a human being.
You have never harmed a human being.
Not meaning to. Not till now.
Mrs. Rattenbury, in answer to my learned friend, you said that if Wood had told you of his intention to murder your husband, you would have prevented it. How would you have done that?
I would have told him not to dare do such a wicked thing.
Would that have been enough?
The way I'd have said it, it would.
I thought he dominated you. Well, supposing you had failed to persuade him, what would you have done?
Gone to the police, I suppose.
The night of the murder, the police were all over the house. Why did you not tell them then?
That was different.
Why?
Well, Rats was dead, and I suppose I felt responsible.
I beg your pardon?
I said I suppose I felt responsible.
Responsible. Thank you.
Only two questions, Mrs. Rattenbury. Only two. By the word responsible, did you mean criminally responsible for your husband's murder?
No.
Did you mean morally responsible for your lover's protection?
Yes. That's exactly what I meant.
Thank you, Mrs. Rattenbury. That is all. That is the case for the defence of the prisoner Rattenbury, my lord.
Very well. I think that is a convenient moment to adjourn.
You did very well. Very well indeed. Your job is done now.
Yes.
Has Tony called yet?
Tony? No, he hasn't. Well, how was Mrs. Rattenbury? My God, she must have dominated that boy. Did she... What's so funny?
Yes, I suppose that's how it must seem.
Seem? Edie, you're not saying...
I'm not saying anything.
Yes, you are. I know you too well. That's how it must seem. Edie, she's an awful, awful woman. Sleeping with that boy, with her baby in the room.
What's that got to do with whether she committed murder?
Everything, I should have thought.
Then you don't know the law.
It seems as if I don't know you.
Perhaps you don't. It's that word dominated. All the time, that man was on at her. You were 20 years older, madam, 20 years older. I put it to you that you dominated that boy. Do you know what she answered? When an older person loves a younger, it's the younger who dominates. Because the younger has so much more to give.
And you thought of Tony?
Of course.
My God! To think that a murderess could go free just because a jurywoman overloves a son who doesn't give a damn for her. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that.
You did.
Tony rang me this afternoon. We had a talk. A long one.
In which he told you he didn't love me.
Oh, my God, darling. I only said that because I was so damn angry with you.
Tell me what he said.
Well, his father's got him, 100%. It's a love affair.
What does he want to do?
Live with him, of course.
Forever?
Yes.
Supposing I fight?
They'll fight back.
How?
Tony will tell the judge that he prefers his father to you. Do you really want that? Of course, he said he'll spend some of his holidays with you.
How kind.
Oh, darling, I do know how dreadful all of this is for you, but you must try and forget about it, at least until this awful trial's over. Now, why don't you put your feet up? Let me get you a drink. Darling, I know it's difficult, but you've a big responsibility tomorrow. You're not going to let this terrible business here cloud your judgment about that woman, are you?
No, I'm not.
When this boy met the woman, he was an ordinary, innocent English boy. 4 months later, what do we find? A confessed adulterer, a confessed thief, a confessed cocaine addict, utterly under the influence of an hysterical, lying, drunken woman of abnormal sexual appetites and apparently of no moral conscience whatever.
Can you believe a single word such a woman says? Self-confessed liar, self-confessed adulterer, self-confessed seducer of a tender youth of 17. A woman who, by her own admission, robs her husband of a considerable sum in order to indulge herself in a 4-day sexual orgy at the Royal Palace Hotel with a boy young enough to be her son.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of your number, now I cannot of course mention her name, which would be deeply improper, but I suppose I can say she must be one of the foremost amongst you. A lady evidently of great moral courage and strength of character objected to serving on this case. Why? Inquired his lordship. Because, she replied, I am so prejudiced against this woman's moral character that I cannot be expected to give her a fair trial. But how could she not be prejudiced against this woman? How could any one of you fail to feel nausea and disgust at the ensnaring and degradation of a helpless young man by a middle-aged woman of degenerate and licentious habits? But that is not the offence with which she is charged here in this court.
Well, there it is. That is the woman. It is indeed difficult to find words in the English language in which you may see fit to describe her. But, members of the jury, the natural disgust you may feel for this woman must not, I repeat that, must not make you any more ready to convict her of the crime of murder. In fact, if anything, it should make you less ready to do so. Prejudice, dislike, disapproval, disgust must have no part in your verdict. Well, that is all I have to say to you. You will now retire.
Look, dear, they may be a long time. Would you like to lie down? It'll have to be the floor, but I've had 2 blankets sent in and a pillow. I could make you quite comfy. Or I've brought some cards. How about a little game?
I beg your pardon?
A little game, dear. We could have much longer to wait.
No, thank you.
Anything at all? Coffee? Tea?
No.
Not with a drop of something in it? Try not to fuss, dear. What I always tell my ladies.
Well, Mrs. Rattenbury, how are you feeling? Is she all right?
How could she be? After all that was said about her upstairs.
I should have warned her.
Hello, Mr. Montague.
You must try to understand why Mr. O'Connor had to say those things about you. They must have been horrible to hear.
Not particularly.
But you see, Both Mr. O'Connor and the judge, by saying all those foul things about you, forced the jury to concentrate their minds on only one thing. Did you or did you not commit murder? Well, as we all know, you didn't.
Do you?
Of course. So does Mr. O'Connor.
And Christopher?
And Christopher, most certainly.
Then it doesn't really matter what the jury thinks, does it?
Mrs. Rattenbury, I have every hope that in a matter of hours or even minutes you will walk out of this place a free woman. If you do, what plans have you made?
Her friend, Irene Riggs, is taking her to her home for a few days.
Oh, that's good.
She'll be all right there. She's fond of Irene.
And then you must think of taking up your career again.
My career?
As a songwriter.
Oh, there.
Oh, yes, dear, you must. Just imagine how your songs will sell now.
Jury coming back! Mr. Montague, I want to thank you.
Don't. You have and always will have my admiration.
That's nice. That's the way men used to speak to me.
Members of the jury, are you agreed upon your verdict?
We are.
Do you find the prisoner, Percy George Wood, guilty or not guilty of murder?
Guilty. But we should like to add a rider to that. A recommendation to mercy.
Do you find the prisoner, Alma Victoria Rattenbury, guilty or not guilty of murder?
Not guilty.
And those verdicts are the verdicts of you all?
This will not be tolerated.
Percy George Wood, you stand convicted of murder. Have you anything to say why this court should not pass judgment on you?
Nothing at all.
Percy George Wood, the jury have convicted you of murder with a recommendation to mercy. That recommendation will be forwarded by me to the proper quarter, where it will doubtless receive consideration.
Don't worry, my son. We'll save you. Good night, mate.
Well, my lad, you'll be all right.
Meanwhile, my duty is to pass upon you the only sentence which the law knows for the crime of which you have been convicted. The sentence of the court upon you is that you be taken from this place to a lawful prison, and thence to a place of execution, and that you there be hanged by the neck until you are dead, and that your body be afterwards buried within the precincts of the prison in which you shall have been confined before your execution. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul.
Goodbye. You silly cow.
Let Alma Victoria Rattenbury be discharged.
Oh, I knew it all. I never had a moment's doubt. Come on, darling. Put this Macintosh on. That's right. Oh, we better have that scarf off and this beret on. Now, just until we get home. Put these glasses on, dear. No one will know you. There's a policeman gonna show us out of a special door.
Mrs. Rattenbury, I'm so very pleased.
Come on, dear. That policeman's waiting.
Well, Crum Johnson, I congratulate you on an admirable performance. Of course, you had a hopeless case, but you fought it very well.
Thank you. I must warn you that I intend to take the matter elsewhere of your directly appealing to a member of the jury by name.
By name?
Forewoman?
Foremost. Oh, my dear fellow. Foremost. I'm afraid your hearing is letting you down.
It was, in my view, unpardonable, and I shall say so.
Really? Oh, you mustn't let a little setback sour you, my dear fellow. You've been playing much golf lately?
Not much. Excuse me.
Bad loser. Always said so.
Well, O'Connor, magnificent. The boldness of it staggered me.
Yes, I took a few risks.
There was a moment when I actually thought you were pleading with the jury to have the woman burned as a witch.
Mr. O'Connor! She's disappeared! Alma's disappeared!
Alma?
She suddenly ran right across the street and disappeared.
What happened?
Just now, there was this bus. I thought she was going under it. I shouted to her, but she didn't seem to hear. She just ran and ran.
If she knows your address, she's probably going there.
But she doesn't.
Well, the best thing to do is to go back to where she left you. She's bound to come back when there's no one else around.
No one recognised her, I'm sure. Shouldn't I tell the police?
Well, there's nothing much they can do. I'll come with you.
Really? Women of that class do panic so easily.
Edie? Well? What happened?
Didn't you hear it on the news?
Oh, come on, Edith. I've only got a few minutes. I mean, how did you let it happen? What was the voting?
Let's think. I was at the head of the table, which is where they put the forewoman.
What's the matter with you? Are you drunk?
Yes, I am a bit. Well, each person spoke up and I took the vote down. That was my job, you see.
The voting. How was the voting?
5 for guilty, 6 for not.
So your vote made it 6-all?
No, my vote made it 7-5. Then all the others gave way.
Gave way to you?
Yes.
In God's name, why?
Because she was innocent.
Innocent?
Of murder.
Innocent? Who was it who said that nothing was too bad for that woman? That she deserved lynching?
She may deserve that. She does not deserve hanging for a murder she didn't commit.
Oh, what does that matter, for God's sake?
It matters to me.
Well, what price your pretty little house in Bournemouth now?
But no one in Bournemouth knows that I was...
Oh, of course they do.
I see. Well, I'll have to stay on in this flat.
Looks like it.
And I hate it.
I know. I must go. Poor St. Edith. What's to become of you?
Coroner's report on the matter of Alma Rattenbury. William Mayfield, labourer of this parish of Christchurch, stated that at about 8:30 p.m. on June the 4th, he was walking across a meadow through which ran a stream. On the bank of the stream, he saw a lady sitting and writing. He crossed the stream by the bridge and went down the bank the other side. As he did so, he looked towards her and saw the lady standing, a knife in her hand. He ran back towards her, but before he could reach her, she had stabbed herself in the body 5 or 6 times, 3 of the wounds penetrating the heart. When he reached her, she was dead, her head in 1 foot of water. Here's one of the documents found beside the body. It begins, "I want to make it perfectly clear that
no one is responsible for my action. I made up my mind during the trial that if George was sentenced to death, I would not survive him. This is a lovely world we're in. If only we'd let ourselves see it. God bless my children and look after them."
In this context, I might mention as an unhappy chance that had Mrs. Rattenbury lived only a few more days, she would have heard of the reprieve accorded to George Wood by the Home Secretary.
But I gave you life! I gave you life. And, might I say, at some considerable cost to my own. Really? There's no justice?
In Cause Celeb, by Terence Rattigan, were Anne-Marie Duff, Niamh Cusack, and Tristan Shepherd. Lucy Robinson, Simon Chandler, Freddie Fox, and Tristram Wymark, Jenny Galloway, Tommy MacDonnell, Timothy Carlton, Oliver Cooper-Smith, and Rory Fleck-Byrne, Lucy Black, Nicholas Jones, Richard Teveson, Patrick Godfrey, Richard Clifford, Sarah Waddle, and Michael Webber. And you'll find a full character list available on the Radio 4 website. Casting director was Sarah Bird. Original music was by Adrian Johnston.
I shall kiss your lips and love you, dogged Marie. I shall kiss your